Have opportunity for public comment later in the evening. But I would like to begin our meeting tonight by stating what we all know. And that is that last week we saw one of the most tragic and reprehensible crime sprees that has ever darkened the streets of Billings. 4 people, including a one-year-old infant, lost their lives as a result of senseless gun violence carried out apparently by teenagers. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the victims, as well as to the neighbors and to others who've been severely impacted by these crimes. Tonight, Chief St. John is with us to provide additional information relating to these events. The chief will also do his best to answer questions from the council, but I hope that you'll understand that there may be questions that the chief cannot fully answer because the investigations are in a very early stage and they all involve sensitive criminal justice information. We appreciate the nonstop work that the chief, his department, and our other first responders and law enforcement partners have done over the last 10 days to respond to these crimes and successfully apprehend suspects in all of these cases. We also want to acknowledge the physical and emotional toll that these things have on not just the victims and our other members of our community, but our first responders and their families. If anyone is interested, additional comments made by the Chief, County Attorney Scott Twido, City Administrator Chris Kukulski, and myself at the Thursday, November 2nd press conference can be viewed by going to the Billings Police Department Facebook page. Finally, I encourage us all to be better parents, invest in our youth, report anything that might involve criminal activity, stand by each other, and in our own unique way, pray for and lift up our community. We had a request from Councilmember Chiriki in recognition of these tragic events, just for a 1-minute moment of silence for the victims of these crimes, and I think that's a good idea. So unless there's any objection from our council, I will just ask us to remain silent. If you'd like to bow your head or whatever recognition you'd have, feel free, and we'll just do that for 60 seconds. So if you would, join with me in a 1-minute moment of silence. Thank you very much. Before I turn it over to the Chief, Chris, do you have any further comments?
I don't. As you mentioned, Mayor, ask the Chief to come tonight to make some comments and then to answer questions. We'll just go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief.
Mayor, Council, good evening. Thank you on behalf of the police department for the comments and for the prayers as well and the moment of silence. These are tragic times in our community and for families in particular. It's just something that is abhorrent to everybody in town and the police department as well. which really has us redoubling our efforts to make sure that we can bring justice to all the families that are involved here and, help resolve some of the issues and the problems that led up to these tragedies. As you indicated, Mayor, we have active investigations going on, so I won't be speaking about particular details on any of those other than what's already been in the media. What I can tell you, again, is we have a very dedicated force. Pretty much our entire detective division, our street crimes unit, augmented by patrol to work these very complex and very large crime scenes to make sure that we are processing them, getting all the evidence we need, presenting them to the county attorney for a successful prosecution. As you're aware that we have made arrests in one case, Chandler Stallcup, the Rocky athlete. As a matter of fact, there is a memorial for him going on right now at school with the same sentiments as you put forth, Mayor. So again, we have hurting communities across the board. The other cases that are open, our detectives have identified suspects and are working to a point where we can make arrests, or at least get them presented to the county attorney for prosecution. So we ask that public be patient while we work through that. To do it right, it takes a little bit of time. And so we are doing our very best on that. You are also spot on when you talk about how it affects the police. 3 of our officers were stood down for several days because of the trauma that they saw specifically on the North 17th scene involving the baby. So everybody thinks they were just supposed to pick it up and go, and that doesn't happen all the time. So there is profound effects on what we see, and obviously we want to make sure that our people are taken care of as well. Again, in general, I think those who watched the press conference that we had last week, I acknowledge that the gang problem, the gang situation has become more prevalent, specifically since 2021. We identified some signs that it was becoming more problematic. We had a third-party expert that was here in 21 and indicated that our problem was moderate to or moderately low. And in a return trip a couple of years later, that was getting to be moderately high. And his assessment of that was, if you don't do something now, then you're going to have an unmanageable situation. And so we took that advice, plus a content expert I have in-house, and pivoted our street crimes unit 3 months ago to essentially full-time working on the gang situation. As you're aware, our street crimes unit is specifically tasked to deal with low-level drugs, burglaries, thefts, stolen vehicles, those type of things. And the numbers that they have put forth have been impressive. We have taken that group and turned their focus on this particular issue. The work that they have done in just 3 months has been very, very good. It takes a little while to build an intelligence base that we can operate off of to identify and target and try to dismantle some of these things. In the 3 months that they have been in operation, they have made arrests, gang-related, 32 of those. They've investigated 15 shootings that had gang ties to it. Now, not all shootings hit people. Obviously, we have in the air, we have houses, 15 of those. They have validated, basically identified, and what they call validate 70 individuals for gang affiliation. And they've also identified 17 known adult gangs and 7 juvenile gangs. Not everybody's involved in criminal behavior, and I will say that the problem that we are seeing is being committed by a very, very few people at this point. Not that it can't get bigger, but the one number that I think is pretty stunning is that the adult gang members who are currently on probation and parole that are here in Billings is 363. So we have a lot of individuals who have been in prison that have gang affiliation of some sort that are being released, sent to Billings. And so you have that educational base, a lot of the things that, we have noticed, as I indicated, primarily we're dealing with juveniles, as young as 13 years old. Where are they learning to do the things that they do? Well, the olders are teaching the youngers some of the tricks of the trade, and we're seeing that in some of our dealings. So, again, that's a lot of the presence that we have. Again, not everybody is involved in criminal activity. As far as juveniles, we've confirmed 60 of some sort of gang affiliation. And the question that was asked a while back, and I will just add to this again, we want to be very mindful about talking about this situation in public because we don't want to glorify this. And what happens is that somebody's going to be seeing, if we call out a specific gang or a specific name, specific neighborhood, that to them is validating, that to them glorifies it, that exacerbates the problem. So you won't hear me talk about that, but what I'll say is that we have gangs that are commonly known to the public from watching the news and all that span from the West Coast to the East Coast. And additionally, we have local neighborhood gangs. And that is what we're working with. So what started really ramping up here of late, again, what we were seeing was a bit more territorialism with the graffiti. We saw, obviously, a lot more firearms in play, stolen guns, shootings, again, not necessarily at people. And so these things were starting to get our attention even more, which drew us to put more resources and direct that at that problem. And so they had been very productive in the 3 months that they have, but obviously more work to be done on that. As we move forward here, the strategies that we have in general, three-prong. Number one is prevention. We know that this is the absolute best way to stop all of this violence is prevention. We need to get into these kids early, whether it's through schools, we need to educate the parents, through community engagement, provide resources for the community on what's out there, what's available, what to look for. I mentioned to Dr. Garcia, we might need to revisit the educational program called GREAT, Gang Reduction Education Training. It was running parallel to the DARE program back in the day, and they both went away for whatever reason. But that puts officers in schools teaching this gang reduction stuff. A lot of public awareness, I think we have that now. And I think the other thing is that, as a community, we need to make a unified statement that this is not acceptable. And it has to come from the community as a whole, not so much just the police department. On the intervention side, that's where our officers and school professionals or whatnot, the best success that we have for gang reduction is to intervene. And when we do that, we know that enforcement alone doesn't work. But when we intervene and we get rapport, and we provide programs, and we give them direction, and we give them opportunity, and show them, that there's a better way than gang life, we have a lot of success that way. And again, what I'm talking about is we really need to engage our partners in the community, the schools. I think a surprise to me was probably the one that can provide everything right now for relatively inexpensively was the Boys and Girls Club. They said, we do all of this and a lot cheaper than what everybody else does. So there is a resource right there. making sure that, we can have some jobs for these kids. And Lynn, again, we have talked about this ad nauseum, but we got a mental health component here that is, on the treatment side and support side is seriously lacking. Seriously. One hospital providing services for the entire community. And I think we all know that is woefully insufficient. I think some other things too is making sure that these probationers that come to Billings have a viable reentry program. You just don't go from prison to a halfway house and into Billings, into the town and expect to do well. And especially if you have some sort of gang affiliation, you're going to gravitate toward that. And so again, we'll be working with our probation parole, all of those to help with that. Hospital-based intervention too is a subject which essentially says if somebody shows up in a hospital because of gang violence, that's where we intervene right there. You probably have a captive audience, if you will, while they're getting treatment, and we can bring the resources to them. These are all things that are in play in other cities with gang problems. They've been successful to various extents. But again, a lot of this, we got to really activate our community to get involved on the prevention and some of the intervention side. And then last, of course, is going to be the enforcement. You're going to have people that violate the law. We need to aggressively investigate, make arrests, charge people as high as we can. Specifically, we'd like to get people in the federal system, which is a problem, especially if you're a juvenile. They are not geared for that. It's going to take something very catastrophic to get a juvenile in front of a federal jury. Adults, on the other hand, they're going to go away for a long time. I've mentioned it before that it's probably time for us to revisit the Youth Court Act. It's been in place and unchanged as far as I know for many years, does not provide officers or attorneys with a lot of teeth given what we're dealing with today. It was designed for runaways, truants, and a fist fight after school. Not homicides, not gun possession, not the drugs, not the things that we're seeing with. I can tell you that our officers in all of these cases have touched these individuals numerous times, and because of our inability with law, with the legal system, couldn't really do anything to them other than confiscate guns, refer them to a probation officer, things of that sort. And so again, a little bit of work to be done there. We certainly will continue to work with our federal partners. When you start talking about guns, ATF, DEA on the drug nexus there, because you have that prevalence. And the other thing, just ideas out there, let's get maybe a gun take back or a gun buyback, things like that to get those guns off the street. So there's a lot of things that, we're doing right now, and there's a lot of things that we can mobilize the community with. I disagree with some of the assessments that Billings is circling the drain because of this. These are acute, tragic things that took place in a week. It's unheard of over the years. Our homicide numbers are still down. Our violent crime, third quarter compared to other years is still trending downward. So our overall strategies are still working. That doesn't mean a dang thing to the families of these victims. We're fully aware of that, and we have to continue to do work. But I'm not ready to throw Billings away because there's a lot of good things going on. We're going to keep working through this. A lot of information there, a lot of rhetorical. There is a plan. We have it available. We have been working it. I think the big thing now, if we can engage the community on the front end of things, we can't do it by ourselves. We can't do it by ourselves. We need help across the board. What we're tasked with, we've been doing okay. Again, investigating, arresting, and all that type of stuff. Again, that doesn't mean anything to the families of the victims. So we're going to continue working that. Mayor, that was a lot of stuff. I will turn it back over to you, or questions if you desire.
I'm sure we do. Appreciate it, Chief. Council, do want to give you an opportunity for questions. Just a reminder, we do still have a full agenda, so we won't be able to spend all night, although we could. And I would love to, I'm sure. But questions for the chief. We'll start down here if there are any, Councilmember Gulick. And then also, if you could help me spot our people, our council members on line too, if I miss somebody too. But Councilmember Gulick.
Yeah, thank you, Chief and Mayor. Yeah, clearly there's a lot of frustration in the community and that we hear it as council, and I know council, a lot of frustration on council in terms of some things that have just been sort of intractable. I guess the question that comes to mind is with the work you've been doing the last 3 months with on the prevention side or identifying gang activity, to what degree is not having capacity in the jail been a hindrance in those efforts? And yeah, I guess
Yeah, thank you for the question. It 100% has impacted our ability. Again, we were taking guns off of kids, and we've taken guns off of adults that probably shouldn't have the guns. And so there are some cases there unequivocally that we had space in both the youth services, which is the juvenile detention facility, and the adult side, that we'd have put people in jail. And we just didn't do that. So, we document terribly frustrating for, not only the community, for council, because you listen to it, officers too. They're not happy with that. However, what I told them is that you go do what you do, and can't be responsible for somebody else. You control your attitude, your effort. Don't just say, well, what's the difference? I'm not going to make an arrest. You do what you do. And they've been doing that. So those are some of the other numbers that we report later on.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese, anything before we go to Councilmember Owen?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, again, I feel for the officers and the victims in this time. Mayor summed it up well, but I guess I do have a couple of questions regarding the suspects. Former Councilmember Ewald really kind of saw this coming, I think, 2 years ago when he wanted us to try and do something about getting a lot of these pre-release and stuff diverted to other cities. Can you indicate of these current situations, without divulging any sensitive information, if any of these involved had a lot of law enforcement interactions in the past and or were pre-release of some sort?
Yes to all categories, without giving away too much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I have so many questions, but I don't want you to think that I'm Monday morning quarterbacking. I don't have any ability to do that, but I do want to give voice to some of the questions that I've been asked and just let you handle them, because I think they're important to at least put them out there. First of all, I'm so grateful. There was a picture in the Gazette of an officer carrying that infant out that was heart-wrenching. I can't imagine what your folks are going through, and I'm grateful that they show up for work every day. There has been a fair bit of conversation. I've heard it, I'm sure other council members have, that maybe we need a more aggressively enforced youth curfew. Do you think that would make a difference?
Absolutely. That is one of the strategies, is to, aggressively get after the things that we can get after. I can't tell you the last time I made a curfew arrest, let alone anybody else. I'd have to look it up, see what the rules are. Whether they go to municipal court or whether they go to youth court, I'm not sure. But absolutely, we can. Again, falling into our strategy of the enforcement side of things, that's part of it. Is we're going to get after every little violation and get people held accountable for that. So that is spot on and a valid valid observation.
Okay, the next mayor follow-up, if I could. You had mentioned working with federal partners, but what about state partners? For example, has anybody asked the Attorney General for some resources for like a youth violence, youth gang task force? Are we bringing them on board as well?
Council member, I haven't specifically, and I omitted them unintentionally. They are part of our task force team across the board. And again, it was all hands on deck. I had a HSI, which is Homeland Security, working with one of our detectives over the weekend. As you're well aware, we have some DCI agents that are assigned here in Billings, and they are tasked to help with things. I haven't spoken to the Attorney General specifically about this. I did have a phone call from a senator today about what it is we can do. Obviously, on the federal side of things, all he can do is help us with the federal law. You know how that's going to go. And so, people are paying attention and they want to help where they can, and we are leveraging it as much as we can.
So that is a perfect lead into the last question that I'll ask, and then I'll hand over the mic. I think you're 100% right to say that this is the time when we all have to come together and say this will not be tolerated in our community. We will not be weak in the face of this. Even if it was just a blip, it can't ever be a blip again. So what do you need from us?
What was the last question?
What do you need from us?
Just what you said. I think what the tendency is that we have these very, very tragic situations in a short amount of time. We have got tremendous amount of media coverage, which is keeping things on the front. And we're going to eventually solve these cases. The news cycle is going to run. We're going to be on to something else, and people are going to forget about it. People cannot forget about this. Is that this needs to say a steady message throughout, regardless of what's going on, whether we got gumdrops and rainbows coming out of the police department or bad things, is that this is not going to be tolerated by this community. And all these organizations are going to support, and the police department's going to do their stuff. And it's not just us. Again, our public safety partners are here. But we couldn't do it without them. And that was a firefighter, I believe, with the infant there. But same thing. I mean, that's something that, I don't think anybody signed up to do. So.
Thank you. Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Chief. Mayor, I know we have more questions and public comment. Are we planning to come back to this during council discussion?
For general counsel says it's not on our agenda, so I would not
Well,
recommend that.
whenever we have time, I have some questions for the city administrator, but I know we have many public members here who want to comment, so I'll pass for now.
Okay. Councilmember Joy?
Pass.
Okay. Chief, this is, I don't know, there's really a question. It's just a request that you and your department start thinking about possible legislative changes when it comes to addressing, in particular, stolen guns. It's unclear to me exactly what the legislative landscape looks like there, but just in some brief conversations, it's unclear to me whether we have at the state level enhancement for theft of a gun. Obviously, if you steal something of a certain value, regardless of what it is, it's a crime. But if we don't have enhancements there, I would hope that we could work on that with our legislators. Also, just possession of a stolen gun. If you steal a gun, you can be charged for that. But if you only are in possession, you say, I didn't know it was stolen, I'm not sure that violates any sort of law. And then lastly, looking for some sort of state enhancement for the use of a stolen gun. The feds, of course, have enhancements for use of any gun in commission of a crime. We just want to make sure that state law is as strict as federal law, especially if it involves a stolen gun. So I just want to give you a chance to comment if you wanted to. It's too early to address specific legislative changes, but if you want to, please feel free to.
Yeah, certainly, Mayor, and I concur with everything you said, and we have state statutes that touch on two of the three things that you referred to, and I know County Attorney Twito fought very hard for the felon in possession. For some reason, we lost that, trying to get that back in. But that's one of the frustrations that our officers have is we don't have any leverage with the firearm cases. When we find somebody with a stolen, it's simply stolen property. You're in possession of stolen property at a particular value. If it's a requisite amount that's a felony, that's what it is. So really drilling down on that. Youth court, again, I'm sorry, the Youth Services Act needs to get up here into the 21st century with some of their things. And then, of course, the federal system. If we can do something from the power of the city council, I don't know if you can get the federal government to address, their laws as it applies to juvenile. They just don't do it. And here we are with massive gun issues, stolen guns, shootings, homicides. If it was an adult, it would be a federal case. It's juvenile, it's not. So again, things to work on there. But to your point, Mayor, you're spot on all three of those.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Triki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Chief St. John. Are the number of stolen guns, is that number going up right now?
Yes, I believe as it stood on Thursday, there was 222 guns that have been stolen from houses, and 150 or so were out of vehicles that are either locked or unlocked. And so that was one of the requests that I had of the community was to please secure your weapons. Don't leave them in a car, either locked or unlocked. And if you do leave it in a car, get a lockbox. I have heard some comments that I'm victim blaming, and I'm not victim blaming. I'm just asking for some help because, a lot of these guns that are being stolen are showing up in our shootings. So.
Thank you, Chief. Do you think, well, you brought up the idea of maybe doing a gun buyback. I think that has a lot of value in just keeping the issue in front of everybody. I'm not sure how much, do you have an opinion of it having an actual impact on the number of guns that are on the street?
Council member, I don't know. It would be new to Billings in my time. We haven't had that. Anytime you're saying buyback, then that means money, and I'll probably be asking you how much you want to spend. I'm sure we'll get some things, some guns back, whether we want them or not, whether they are impactful for anything or not. But if they're off the street, then I'm happy with it. I don't care how we get it. Certainly would need to coordinate with our federal partners on what that looks like. But it's an idea. I'm not just standing here saying I don't know what to do. There are some things we can do to try to help alleviate some of the pressures that we're experiencing.
Thank you, Chief. And Mr. Mayor, just a heads up, I do intend to bring up during council discussion, a discussion about what we can do to help the chief keep this issue in front of the public going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Princeton?
Thank you. So Chief, you had mentioned in, I think it was the press conference, the 300 and so people associated with the gangs that are part of probation and parole. And I'm going to tag on what Councilmember Neese was talking about is, seemed like DOC was doing a little bit better job of not putting so many conditional releases here in Billings, but all of a sudden it spiked back up and we know exactly who those people are, evidently. And they're already committing crimes. So that puts that strain not only on jail, but also on the courts. So I would hope if we have to write another letter, that somehow or another, we need to convince DOC that we do not care to have their conditional releases here, whether they want to come here or not. Because I understand that's part of the issue. They want to come here. Well, that's because that's where their gang members are. So it just doesn't make sense that you put them here. One of the questions that I also had, and it's something that talked with Assistant City Administrator, and I think, Tina's here as well, is that we talked about these flop houses, drug houses. And there was a task force here, that I guess, and I know you have someone in your force that is part of that. So if we have known flop houses, and you have people that that are there, because that was the statement, I think, well, we knew those people when they started running away, we knew exactly who they are. So my concern is, what are we going to do about public nuisance with abatement for the property owners that allow people to stay there, and whether they pay rent or not, because criminals, and I think there's that known number of people, or of offenses at these known locations, or these people are on probation and parole. What are we going to do about this number of flop houses that we have in Billings?
Certainly, council member. With your permission, I'm going to yield to Tina Hoger, who has that information. And I will tell you from the police department side, obviously, we know that blighted property, we know that, that rundown houses and rundown properties attract crime. So it is in our best interest to support code enforcement, to take enforcement action when necessary. The houses down on the south side, you heard the comments, they're no, officers are no stranger going there. Would that have made a difference in someone's death, whether the flop house was there or not? I don't know. But the underlying point is we get stuff cleaned up. It's not an attractant for criminal behavior or, criminals in general. So with your permission, man, permission.
Well, I think that'd be fine, sure. If it's, Tina, if you want to comment on the question? Code Enforcement Supervisor Tina Hoger.
So if I'm understanding your question is how we can do better. So I actually looked at the history of many of the addresses that were involved in the past week. The code cases associated with those have either all been rectified. So I believe there is opportunity to maybe dive into some of these addresses more, like we did with other properties when we formed the nuisance property team. I'm certainly willing to look outside the box and think outside the box and look at different ways that we can approach these properties. I do agree with the chief, though, that just because a property gets cleaned up doesn't mean that their activity will change. So we try to do what we can from our aspect and keep those properties in compliance. But when it escalates to this, we certainly need to try a different approach.
So just to follow up.
Go ahead.
So, Bettina, it's my understanding that you can only deal with the property.
That is true.
The police, unless they have, I can't think of the terms they use, but they have to have a reason to go in there. Thank you. Big word, probable cause. Probation and parole doesn't have that. They don't need probable cause if they check and everything. So I guess that's part of my, that cooperative thing that they're doing, and even I guess DEA is involved in that. There's narcotics coming out of the state also that are part of, I suppose, the chief's task force. So it seems like we got a lot of people there, and if we know that, some of these people are still committing crimes and they're at these homes, then, at some point your rights are taken away from you because of criminal activity. So anyway, I appreciate you, and I know that you work hard, and I know the police department works hard, and I'm not saying that, but I just think there are opportunities out there that I think we need to really be looking at.
Sure, but we have to work within a certain confinement. We don't have the luxury of not breaking the rules.
Thank you.
So.
Very good. Thank you very much. Back to the chief, Councilmember Boyette. Do you have anything? Okay, Councilmember Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, just real quick, I wanted to add to the mayor's list of possible state-level code suggestions is a reporting requirement for lost and stolen guns. I don't think we have one now, and I think that'd be something worth pursuing as well.
Yeah, certainly. And I've also heard, a little bit more, some criminal accountability if you lose your gun or whatnot. And again, doesn't play well when you turn around and write a citation to the victim of crime. So we want to educate, just hope people comply with that, but really, really could use the help on that because that's where all the guns are coming from for the most part.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I wondered, Chief, if you have stated that you would like to really invigorate the neighborhood watch. Have you got a concrete plan or action that we can invigorate those neighborhood watch the program across the city? Thank you.
Council member, we do have a neighborhood watch program. It comes out of our crime prevention center. They have people that facilitate those, give the packets. We just need people to reach out to us and say that they're interested. That is one of the tools to help us in any gang reduction, is the neighborhood paying attention to what's going on. You know, if groups of kids running around, unsupervised, you've got graffiti or whatever, the more eyes on this city, the better that we can react to things. And so I will tell you that in all of these cases, a great asset was everybody's Ring doorbell camera across a wide variety of what became crime scene. And our detectives were able to, either through the program called Eyes on the Block, where people sign up to let the police department know, I have a camera, and yes, you may look at it. And those that we just knocked on doors, and we were able to utilize that technology, to help piece the situation together in all cases. And that's just tremendous, the neighborhood buy-in. I don't know what the number was. I think it was probably approaching 800, 900, 1,000 people that signed up for that program. I can get you the exact numbers, but that's telling me the neighbors are engaged and want to help us with that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chief, very much. Councilmember Rowan, I'll leave it to you and your discretion. Said you had a question for the city administrator, whether it's better now or at the end when we get to council discussion at the end of our meeting.
If we have time, I'd like to ask it now.
Well, your judgment, we haven't actually started our meeting yet, so I would cautiously getting into anything too deep at this stage, but I'll leave it to your discretion. I don't know what your questions are.
Well, it's not undeep. I think we've had the chief up here taking a lot of questions, but this is more than just a BPD response. So what's your plan?
So what we're following through with is in the city council's adoption of strategies and priorities. I've asked each of the department directors to take that further into refine those strategic goals into specific objectives, action plans, and performance measures, so that we can bring those back to, this was before this past 10 days, so that can be a discussion we can have with the future council, with whatever happens tomorrow, so that after the first of the year with the city council, we can move forward with a more refined strategic plan where we can talk very directly with you. Ultimately, you guys weigh in. And I think, and this specific issue of improving the health and safety of our community, much of the crime prevention areas that we need to talk about and continue to evolve come from our retreat of this earlier year and our community partners that work in crime prevention. And so whether that blossoms into a community-wide strategic plan, but this is a community discussion relative to crime prevention. This is not a lack of performance of our police department or our prosecutors. This, candidly, if I were to oversimplify it, we have not invested enough in this area as a community in our time and of our attention, so that 13, 14, and 15-year-olds are finding gang membership as some kind of an answer to their issues. So to answer, you asked me an extremely broad question. I'm giving you kind of full scope of what I think are the next evolution of what this future body needs to do in moving beyond a set of strategies and goals. But now in this next year, we need to refine those into strategic goals, objectives, action plans, and our performance measures.
So, Mayor, I'm just going to close with two pieces of feedback. I don't want to wait till January 1.
Yeah.
I know you're having a leadership retreat on November 15th. I would assume we can start some conversations right after that. And then the second is, if, just to your point, I think that all of this it has happened since our last council meeting, right? In the span of us being off, there's been quite a lot unfolding. Would you mind, please, in a follow-up email, sending to council the number of hours you have spent addressing these issues from the last meeting to tonight? I'd just like to know where your time and attention has been.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, council, let's move on to public comment on items tonight. So for members of the public who are out there, we have 5 items on the agenda. There'll be an opportunity for public comment on each one of those later. But if you've got to go and you've got comment on any of those, or you've got a comment on anything that is not on our agenda tonight, including what the chief has been talking about, you're welcome to make those comments both now and at the very end of our meeting. If you want to wait until then, but please make only one set of comments. Ms. Garcia, go ahead. And we just ask that you tell us your name and your address and keep your comments to 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. So I remember being here a year and a half ago and saying, we need to say as a community, enough and it's enough. What are we going to do about these kids that are out past curfew? I brought that up, the kids hanging up on the rims. And the mayor tonight said something that really struck me. Parents need to be better parents. I had that idea, I really did. And then I had a chance to speak with some parents who are doing everything that they can to get their kids on the right path. They're older kids, younger kids. They're doing everything they can without help because there's no help for them or resources. So I used to think like you thought, Mayor, but it's not just that. It is some of it, but it's not just that. And victim blaming, I wouldn't have said the chief is victim blaming. I would actually say you have victim blame. Watching your guys' thing on Thursday, I was really shocked that you said if it was one of my guns, I'd feel really bad. You know, those people with their guns stolen. If you go to the doctor's office, the hospital, and you have your gun on you to the emergency room, do you know what they ask you to do? Go put it in your car. Last minute, you have an emergency. I cut my hand open, severed my nerves. Did I think about my gun being in my purse? It was actually my daughter who drove me there. What do they tell you to do? Go put your gun in the car. City council meetings, when people come here, I remember the talk of having people go put guns, where? In their car. Because my gun is in my purse in my home. If someone breaks in and steals my gun, I should be held responsible? I don't think that's right on any level because I'm a victim too. That's just like saying the girl was wearing too short of a skirt. The girl was wearing provocative clothes. It's the same level. You're violated both ways. I remember sitting here hearing Chief St. John say that there were not gangs. And this amazing gang task force he's put together is awesome. I had an opportunity at the Heights Task Force to meet the head of them. The guy's awesome. The chief did a great job on bringing him in. Unfortunately, it's just a little late.
Thank you very much.
Catherine Card, 2815 4.
I apologize, Catherine Card. Just want to comment. I'm no expert. I'm learning a lot, but I had a conversation with a friend last night who talked about safes for your cars. It's very important, I think, that we do secure our guns, and I just want people to know that there's technology out there. I don't pretend to understand the details, but I would encourage anybody who's interested and does have a gun and they want to carry it in their gun or in their car to look into that technology. But I can't comment any further than that. Go ahead, Catherine.
You don't have any brand names to give us or anything?
No, I don't.
2815 4th Avenue South. I want to thank councilpersons Shariki and Joy for attending the vigil last night that we held. A bunch of community members held near the location where the young 17-year-old young man was killed. And thank you for being there. And Thank you also for encouraging those of us that attended, to attend council meetings. I really, really hope, and I have always been encouraging people to come and at least be present to hear your work, know what you're doing, but also to speak up. On the other hand, I really urge you to be open to the public. As you know, starting 2021, I came to you many, many times about a local motorcycle 1%er outlaw gang. And it took a long time, and it's still not there, where you actually listened to me. I sent much documentation. I was quite vocal in the community because it seemed that nobody was aware and how entrenched this particular gang is. It's not the only gang, motorcycle gang, and the motorcyclists, not every motorcycle group is a gang. There are specific ones that identify themselves, and as you know, I've talked about that before. I just urge you to be open. There were times when I met with you about it and some of the troubled properties around where I live, and actually got kind of a really negative response. And I just urge you, if you want community involvement, I really urge you to pay attention. Don't write, don't mess with your phone. Listen to the community when we're up here for 3 minutes, and really treasure that input. You may not agree with it, but treasure it and help them feel treasured for having the guts to get up and talk to you about it. I also spent a lot of time talking to you about the Colonial and this 312 South 28th. And I've code enforcement. I've faced with them, interfaced with them a long time as well. I just encourage everyone, police and you guys and code enforcement, to really welcome public comment. Again, it may offend you, may get you upset, but it's so important. It took me so many times meeting with you to even get you to consider. By the way, that motorcycle gang, as I've said, has an office now right in downtown with a big, beautiful sign. That's how comfortable they feel to be in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Harrison, and my address is 2901 6th Avenue South. I came prepared to speak about something, but a group of folks that had to leave early to find shelter for the evening asked if I'd speak on their behalf. So before I say my words, I'd like to mention one of the women. Her name is Monica. So I'd like to advocate on her behalf that there's a lot of disabled folks here in Billings who are unfortunately living on the streets. And there were a number of them here tonight. I only found out about it after I myself sat down. But I guess that indicates or signals to me that there's a lack of resources. They actually had to catch transportation to go find somewhere to stay tonight, and that just sounds like a really awful way to live. So I do hope that that's going to be a focus, that we make sure that everyone has a safe place to stay every night. Now, my statements, well, first I'd like to light this fake candle, LED candle, for the families and the victims of the shootings this past week. And I too would like to thank the council members who were at the vigil last night. That was greatly appreciated. I saw a murdered kid Friday night directly across the street from my kitchen door. I heard the gunshots and I thought it was fireworks. I was sure it was fireworks, except it turned out that it was gunshots. And the two kids that I saw running away from the scene, who I thought were the ones that set off the fireworks, it turned out they were the shooters. They were about the same age as my next door neighbor, who I'm babysitting tomorrow night. Within seconds of this happening, a cop car pulled up into the alley where the sounds had come from. And I saw his gun drawn on another person lying on the ground. And I thought that that was one of the other kids who had set off the fireworks. And I thought, wow, what a coincidence. He just happened to be right here. And it took a while for me to realize that this was not a fireworks situation. This was much more serious. And in fact, the person that was lying on the ground was one of the 17-year-old kids who had been shot and killed this week. I heard about 6 or 7 shots fired. I think that's why I thought it was fireworks. And everyone involved were all children. In fact, a girl who was the same age as these kids saw this happen from her window, and that's my neighbor who lives across the street. She was not involved with anyone.
So, Katie, your time's up, but we don't want to cut you off.
I know,
so
I'm
we're
sorry.
gonna let you keep
I
going. Just try to-
didn't time this.
Go ahead.
Anyways, the point is that there were actually 3 taped off crime scenes within 2 blocks of my house within a matter of 3 days. As of Friday night, I actually started looking for other cities to move to. And today I started a brand new business in Billings. I guess I'm just here to express that I'm very torn and voice a lot of conversations that I've had that I think this is a prevention problem. It's a very complex prevention problem. Obviously, a lot of the preventative methods have been addressed tonight, but I think it's a community problem, and I think it's going to take all of us sort of reaching our hands out, talking to each other and listening to each other to really find out how to solve this problem going forward. There is a peace coalition that has been recently organized. Some of the members of that peace coalition are in this room. If you'd like to find out more about that peace coalition, it's meeting every week. Going forward, just let me know. You all have my email address. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, guys. Y'all just excuse me, I come from a different breed. My name's James Lewis. My mailing address is 2822 Minnesota Avenue, Mission. I reside in the streets, so I have a completely different perspective. Just as a brief intro of myself, there are 52 placements in Georgia custody as child services. I look at things a lot differently. I appreciate y'all's structure, what you got here. From the council to the mayor to the families, I apologize for any of it. We'll continue this one other day whenever I have my facts. In the meantime, I think about most of it's just us being a positive influence and not harping on any one thing too strong as far as homeless goes. From vagrancy, I've seen what my influence can do. There's people here that know me from having been moved from spot to spot. I own the camper right now, currently parked by Salvation Army. I got here when the camper was blessed to me 3 weeks ago on Tuesday. I asked that man for a week of grace because I didn't have that kind of stability in myself. I had it in my employment, I had it in my environment. I took possession of it the following Sunday after the doctor took a toe off that Wednesday. From then to now, guess what? You can put it in the field because they're camping. The city will allow it. Nope. An hour later, the city said, hey, guess what? Not their field, not our city, not our streets. Put it in the county somewhere. We can allow it. It's camping. I come from the East Coast. We have watershed rights where I can go to a government land. I can go to the game warden's property. I can get up to a extension of 28 days and camp. We can't do that here. That would solve a lot of stress here that y'all have. Fix it where we can get a 3-day or 5-day or 7-day permit, or we can get a federal extension of 28 days. Anywhere close to the water, to the river. Put it back in nature. Let's do it appropriately. I appreciate you, sir. I've got a lot of influences and ideas just because my brain works that way. Sometimes my mouth don't slow down. That can be just as negative as it can positive. I know that. My mental health issues are a little different. I'm under duress and got a time clock to keep on. That's different. We'll continue this one day when I got numbers and facts to comment on it. I can't comment on the families, but I met someone who's related. He was the father-in-law to her, and she was his niece. I watched that woman in torment because he's a good man, and she missed that child. And she sat in my camp. I just got ran off of a property from Salvation Army to the street, from the street to the man who owns a tattoo shop. He was irate and going to tow myself to 6th Avenue. I asked him for help just to get to the field. Y'all gonna continue to get reports about my camp or my camper. I don't have the means to afford to move it by myself without towing it by physically. We did that on the third move. I made 3 moves in 36 hours. But when the actual book record shows, hey, look, man, we dealt with Mr. Lewis 32 times right here. I'm not trying to be in any way passive aggressive or book the law or just move 30 feet down the road. I don't have the resources here to do that. I'm native in native land without check incentive, still native. I make a joke for myself called Sasquatch. They're size 17. That's how I can be comfortable and still be up here. I have to joke. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Brad Molnar, Senator for Senate District 28, Laurel and east of here. The reason I'm here is A, because I was asked to be here, and B, because everything that happens in Billings affects Laurel and the people on the outskirts and when they come here. A few days ago, a little bit ago, you had a 40-minute press conference on these issues. You just had Chief St. John say the exact same things. Out of all the people that talked at the press conference, only Chief St. John was right on every point. He understands the problem, he sees it, he lives it. He did not have solutions because he can't have solutions. Solutions come from the cities and the counties working with the state, not talking to themselves in a coffee clutch. One of the people said that we're going to bring in our consultants, they'll do 2 days of work setting policy, then bring in the stakeholders. If that isn't political gibberish, I've never heard it. Those that designed the failed system and profit from the failures are not the ones to turn to. The real stakeholders are the young criminals about to start serving a life sentence on the installment plan, their victims and the families of both. You will not see them at the table as a stakeholder. Most of the press conference showed the problem with our perspective and not in our reality. As the chief said, years ago, the Montana Board of Crime Control allocated money for soccer fields to curb juvenile crime. It didn't work. Now I hear we need millions for park money for the same purpose. The restorative justice model is what the state is based on. It must fail of necessity. Put in place while the Juvenile Justice and Mental Health Commission was still taking public comment without public comment. And it is still what we do. Immediate, consistent, enforceable, avoidable consequences are what's in the Youth Court Act. I wrote the words. Within 2 sessions, almost everything I did, which was an uphill fight of monumental, epic proportions, were deleted. Except for that. What do we not do? Immediate, consistent, enforceable, avoidable consequences. We tell them to show up for public service. When they don't, they get more probation, followed by, why didn't you show up? You're getting more probation, and go wash a cop car. Please show up this time. Why did you not show up? That is our system. You need more space for juvenile offenders? Don't tell me. Tell Governor Gianforte that the head of the DOC should go. Because the Pine Hills facility has been turned into an adult facility when our problem is, how do you stem it? You don't stem it when they're 30 years old, you stem it when they're a juvenile. And to quit sending young, nonviolent offenders to MSP to make space for adult offenders at Pine Hills. Tell me at what point that makes any sense. We passed legislation like 791. The governor had a signing ceremony. The Attorney General was lauded it. And if you have questions, I'll answer them. It is guaranteed to make the system significantly worse. I'll skip down to my last couple of sentences. I see I've used up my 3 minutes. To measure this, you don't do it, as the chief said, how many arrests, how many convictions, how serious were they? Those are determined by the cutoff point and not necessarily a reflection of reality. The reality is the business model. 3 years ago, heroin was $300 to $400 a gram. Now it's $150 to $300 per gram, laced with fentanyl extra. 3 years ago, meth was $800 a gram. Now it's $400 a gram, except for Indian reservations in Butte where it's cheaper, or if it's laced with fentanyl as extra. 3 years ago, fentanyl was $30 to $40 a pill. Now it is $5 to $20 a pill. The demand is not going up, but the supply is. If you can't measure failure by how cheap your drugs are, you can't measure failure. And we, as a society, as a legislature, as governing bodies, are failing the people we are sworn to protect.
Thank you for your perspective, Senator. Next.
Hi, I'm Dina Bishop, and I live at the 4th Avenue Inn right now. This is all some really heavy stuff that we've been discussing tonight. I heard the word system, and the system you create is the system that creates you. Definition of a system is a set of things working together as parts of a mechanical or interconnecting network, which would be a community and all the different parts of that community. I heard some talk about law, and law is a system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members, which may enforce by the implementation of penalties. And there's a hierarchy to these laws. It starts with the Constitution as the most authoritative, and then proceeds in order through authoritativeness, through statutes, judicial opinions, administrative regulations. The histories of laws are the foundation of ancient Rome, which brings me back to, not to sound redundant, but Mark 12:35-40. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. If I think back to the Pledge of Allegiance that we said when we were children, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I think that I could go on about what's a code and what the Constitution says about homelessness, etc. But really, when it comes down to the basis of all of what we've talked about tonight, we've fallen away from the love. And when children are joined with their families and their communities in this network of love, then they don't go looking for gangs, and they don't stray in ways that can hurt them and your children, because your children go to school with children that are in the foster care system or that have not a whole family joined together in what would be called a typical family. So I think at all its basis, law has convoluted a lot of things, and it has taken away from what the spirit of the law was meant to be, which is love and community.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Okay, we thank everybody, and we'll close then the public comment for this period and move on to item number 1. Feel free if anybody needs to leave to do so, but we'll move on to our crisis response unit update. Our first item up. Chief Banfield, I think, is our presenter.
Mayor, Council, just like to reiterate, we're going through some tough times in our community, and hopefully we can find some answers. As you guys have pushed us to producing some new policies and procedures and operational tasks for the community dealing with substance abuse and just some crisis handling of our community. That started in 2021 for us, developing this program. You guys, through the CPSE study and also the high utilizer program, pushed us to develop some answers for our community. What that ended up becoming was a public and private partnership with us and Rimrock that was out of an RFP. And we've implemented these policies and procedures that we're seeing. The program has been up and running for about 40 days. You guys got about 30 days of data. It is a limited data a piece, right? There's not a whole lot in there, but we can talk about some of those pieces. If you look at the sheet I did attach to this memo, we have a total number of incidents for 1 week is about 32. Since the beginning of the process in October, we had 129 calls for service. We're creating those through dispatch, and in fact, we're in the middle of with emergency medical dispatching. We're changing some of those parameters to get more of this unit connected to it. And so you're going to see an increase in numbers. We purposely pushed that just inside the city limits and started letting that out through a soft opening into the Billings Urban Fire Service area. And now we're getting some requests into the county, and we're starting to see that ask of this service. We also foresee us going into the school systems and kind of collating with that care that's happening inside their school system. If you look at the data, you can see the calls per week and the calls by time. We originally started this program from 10 a.m. and lasting at 10 p.m. Sometimes that obviously is our peak demand, but we can have some missed calls in the morning and some held over calls in the evening. That doesn't mean those calls aren't happening past midnight, and they are. You can see the calls by service area on the bottom of this, and then of course calls by station. There's also on one of the sheets, it shows a call in Laurel's area, and that's as far as, our ability to touch those service areas in the Billings Urban Fire Service area, that's right on that line. So it got categorized as a one call in Laurel's area, but that really is our service area. I know it's a limited amount of data for you guys. I'd like to be back here probably quarterly to push this, and you guys can see the outcomes. And that's just the front half of this. I know that through care management and what Rimrock is doing, they are visiting with these patients between 48 hours and 72 hours afterwards and trying to get them the services they need. So we are pushing those patients or victims in the community for the known services we have. We are also working with State Representative Mike Yakowicz. He's the House District 51. He is on some of the committees that are supporting mental health, and we're reaching out to him for that you're starting to see some legislative changes and dollars changed to support mental health in the state of Montana. We know that they are earmarking some stuff for the western side, and we are actively with community members supporting both hospitals, police departments, fire departments, EMS, to try and bring that something like that onto the east side of the states to support this. We're losing out on some transportation times and just services that should be more local for us. Our state is obviously large. If you guys don't have any questions of me, I can have Coralie talk about some of the follow-up. And also, I'd like to recognize Ariel. She's one of our responders sitting right here. She's our mental health worker. And then Josh. Is Josh in here? Josh is in the back. They're the ones that were on duty. They were sitting up front but had to leave for a call, and they're back. So these are the people, our frontline people that feed us the information on the services and the correlation that we're doing as we move forward, and we're fixing the small things that we're doing. Any questions of me?
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for bringing everybody with you. So questions for the Chief, or we're fortunate to have Coralie and other first responders. Councilmember Owen, Gulick, and Joy.
Thank you. I looked over the materials, and maybe I'm not clear, but exactly what types of call, are they suicide ideation? Are they, what exactly are you showing up for?
So that's
General-
what, we have a physician that, emergency medical dispatching has to be approved by a physician. There's new parameters for the behavioral health pieces that are coming out right now. So we're going to be working through these pieces that designate what is a behavioral health call. A lot of the time, the crew is basically leaning forward and attaching themselves to that as we're learning these call typing in dispatch. So you're going to see those numbers go up in the team approach with Billings Police Department.
But that's not actually what I asked. What are you getting sent to? Like when a call comes in for X, when do they roll the crew?
We've gone from anything from death in the field for supporting family members. We've gone for suicide calls, people in crisis or depression. There's some HIPAA violations, obviously, but those are the type of calls we're being attached to and that they're leaning forward.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Gillett.
So it's just been on the ground for rolling for a little while, but what are some of the areas you're feeling you're having success in terms of the intent of the program, and what are some challenges you're working through?
I would say the successes are the follow-up piece that Rimrock is doing and getting them to our social services. For me, I would say in the future, I can see this expanding, and we're going to need the resources to provide that. And then also just the correlation with the hospitals, state services, and being in the same room with them to show, how we can make this a simplified system.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to ask a question about the response type. What does telemedicine or telehealth look like in terms of, because I know you have your team, what does that look like? And is that something that, I know you only have 40 days of data, 30 days of data, but what does that add to this response? Thank you.
So some of these calls, obviously we can be canceled upon if the police department is handling that at that time. But as these calls extend, we do have peer support people and we have mental health workers. So when there's a peer support person, sometimes they need to reach back to a licensed medical professional. So we use that telemedicine to make sure that they're getting the best services that they can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief, I've got a question about money, and this may be something that Corley wants to comment on as well, but the last sentence in the staff report says that the COVID-19 Health Equity Grant will cover the cost of EMS providers' wages until May of 2024, which then begs the question, what happens in June of 2024? My understanding is that there are dollars from our public safety mill levy, but if you can just comment on the city's funding side of this, but then also how is, as best you understand it, Rimrock Foundation doing when it comes to funding, because we want this to be a sustainable item, and in particular, how does Medicaid reimbursement play into that funding now and in the future, because we know Medicaid expansion is set to sunset at some point in the future. So if you can comment on funding.
So originally you guys, in the first proposal, you guys supported this through marijuana money, was about $230,000. We were able to offset that and not use that money this year. What I'm using is that COVID money to offset this cost. So the city is saving some money, and we're able to add some educational pieces for the EMS providers as we move more forward, and almost a touch of community paramedicine. You're starting to see that healthcare piece also out there as we touch some of these victims and patients. So that's offsetting that, the original money you guys approved, and then we're still waiting for the full disclosure of what the Medicaid reimbursement is that's going to come from legislation. We do have some tentative numbers that are coming at us, and we should know more in January. Rimrock right now is basically funding most of their through extended grant funding and until December, until we can go after that funding just to offset their side of the costs. Medicaid doesn't pay the bills. It's very limited. Supporting Medicaid is super important to offset these programs in the state of Montana.
Thank you. Does Coralie, you want to comment on that?
Hi, yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of comments. First of all, the partnership with the fire department has been amazing. Jason has been wonderful and impressive in his collaboration and support of my team to help us navigate how to handle 911 dispatch. All of that was foreign to us, so great partnership. I want to comment on, you had asked about successes. One of the key successes that I saw in this 30 days worth of data was on the upper right on the sheet that's a full sheet, not the backside. On the upper right, it has 46% resolved in the home. So that was 46% of the calls that we went on were resolved with the client remaining in the home. So did not have to be transported to the hospital, to the crisis center, anywhere else, which I think was a huge success and well surpassed what we expected to happen. And regarding the funding question, the state has been really collaborative because all of the mobile crisis teams across the state were hit with this June 1st that nobody would get any more of this crisis diversion money, which had previously funded all of the mobile crisis teams. And we were all told that Medicaid would begin reimbursing June 1. That didn't happen. They just weren't ready yet. And so the state has worked really closely with us and the other mobile crisis teams statewide to continue to provide some of that funding. So they have agreed to help us with startup costs. We were the only mobile crisis team that decided to start up at this time of Medicaid transition. So everybody else was flowing and they kind of had a role with it. We didn't. And so the state's working with us to make sure that our startup costs are covered. And so that has been really helpful, in addition to having the startup costs from the city and the crisis diversion through the county last year. So all of that helped us get on our feet. You'll see the other thing that was really made us happy and helpful is that 48% of the clients that we've served so far have Medicaid. So that will help us. And so what we were seeing in other counties is they were not able or are not going to be able to sustain their mobile crisis on the Medicaid dollars because you want to be able to respond to everyone, including those who don't have any funding source, which means that your Medicaid ones have to cover the ones who don't. And so that's going to be really hard to do because Medicaid reimbursement is low. And so this has been insightful to us to tell us where we would have to be in order to fund that. So for example, Gallatin County is running at about 26% Medicaid. They cannot fund their mobile crisis team just reimbursing Medicaid, whereas Lewis and Clark is running about 55% Medicaid, which is more similar to what we would expect to see. And so that will help us to support anyone else, respond to every call, I guess is our goal. So that's where we're at. Like Jason said, Medicaid is not up and running yet. So why the state is helping us through January 1 is so that they can have their ducks in a row. We are currently in a rule comment period that ends November 9th. Short notice, I know, but if you want to write a letter of support, it's always helpful. The comment period is to allow us to be able to support the rules that are out there, which we are prepared to do that. But where it affects the city is there's a block grant that's out there. I'm probably going to get too much in the weeds, so I'll sum it up. There's a federal block grant that funnels through the state that you can use if you're 200% above the federal poverty line. So we are proposing, at the request of the state, asked us to come back with some sort of proposal to be able to increase that, because nobody can use that, because you either qualify for Medicaid or you're above 200%. It's such a tiny little sliver that nobody can access that money, so it just sits there. So they're asking us, come up with a better proposal. And so we've done that to propose what would be a realistic number to go up to for the federal poverty line. We hope they accept it, but that would allow us also to build a federal block grant for anyone falling within that. That was really a lot of information, but I was bursting at the
great.
seams.
Thank you. Do you expect
Okay.
Medicaid to kick in January 1st?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Do you expect that Medicaid will be up and running and kick in by January 1st?
I do. I'm optimistic of that. I would hope before then, but yeah.
Okay, very good. We have a question from Councilmember Neese. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I got a couple of questions. I want to follow up on Councilwoman Owen's question about the classifications. Chief, in the future reports, will you be including those classifications in the report so we can see what type of incidents are being addressed?
Yeah, we're moving to more of a police department model where we have some what's called disposition codes. So we'll be able to correlate more of that data as this moves further on. The other pieces I'm trying to capture through the CAD system is, how many times were we able to release the police department or fire department or EMS? As you heard Corley speak about, is about 40% of those were alleviated in a home. So that's kind of one of our markers, but time still is something we're having a difficult time grabbing and capturing in the data.
Okay, and then another question I had was, remember a lot of this was all kind of started to help save the community money. I think the number was $10 million a year this is costing our community. How are you tracking and reporting that this is reducing that $10 million a year?
I can give you 4 examples offline that I know we have moved a few patients back to other communities. We've found.
I'm sorry, Chief, I don't mean to interrupt you there, but I'm talking about in reporting that. So in your next report, I know you don't have it this report, but in your report, can you quantify that amount that we're, how it's saving the community and reducing that $10 million to the community? I did hear some, how it's prevented a lot of these going to the hospital, things like that. I'm sure that's a savings there. So I know we were able to quantify the amount that was being used, but now as we service these people, can we start keeping tallies of that to quantify the amount that we're saving the community?
Absolutely. In the high utilizer study you guys did, you averaged everyone out to about $90,000 to $110,000 a piece. And so, if you think about the 4, just right off the top of my head, that we've moved to other services and systems approach, you could, what are you at, $360,000, $400,000 that we're saving throughout the system. That includes the hospitals and things like that. But if that's the number you want to use, we can sure capture that.
Okay, and then lastly, I was a little surprised to hear you're rolling out to the county so soon. Is the county, I know the city is committed to some funds. Is the county now committing funding to this program?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of times where the crisis response unit hasn't been busy, and they see all the calls that are going on. So they've actually called me and I said, yes, please grab that one. It's a moral issue for the limited exposure. So I'm having to make some things on the fly as we tighten up the response areas. And a lot of this still is in the Billings urban fire service area, which, per our agreement, like services need to go in those areas. So, that will put some pressure on this, and we are always looking for, more funding sources. And if the county starts to see this as a viable option for them, we'd love to get some partnership with them.
Okay, just to follow up on that, but if we can keep track of how much is going into the county, I know that we have
absolutely
the county on the service and how they charge for the bus, and maybe this needs to be amended to the agreement so that we can include some funding from them.
Yep, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief Valdez is very aware and has been telling me to watch that.
Right, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Purington?
The question that I have has to do partially with you, partially with Derek back there in the 911 call center. So your first responder type, I think eventually it was hoping to be that you'd have someone at the call center that would say, this is a crew response. Have you had that distinction yet? It looks like you only have 12%, 12.8% of those calls that I guess they're telling you this is crew only.
Yeah, and what you're seeing there was the newness of the program, the newness for the dispatchers, and then of course the protocol that's built into the medical dispatch. So as we get better at this, I think that call typing will widen, and we can make sure we're getting to all of those calls. We track something in the fire and EMS called unit hour utilization, and realistically, if you're not doing work about 25 to 28% of the time, that's an efficiency issue for us, and we're real close.
So do you have a guess, crystal ball, what you would like to see in this first responder type? What percentages do you think that there'll be the hope is, and I think that kind of relates back to Roy's question about saving money, that you will be responding to much more than less than 13% of those calls.
Yeah, and we're going to work through that with, again, the medical dispatch piece has to be approved by the physician that's over our department. So we're going to work through that here shortly.
Just to make sure that we understand this pie chart. Crew responded to all of these calls. This is.
And Corley, I'm just going to ask you to speak into that microphone that we can hear better. Thank you.
Crew responded to all of these calls. Crew only was the only responder on the 12% of the calls.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do is decrease, and this goes to Councilman Neese's question or comment about how do we track the cost savings? Well, ideally, we would decrease the amount of time BPD has to be there and has to respond. And we're already starting to see them. One of the ways that we can get this is that BPD does a overnight. So our team gets off at 10 p.m. They encounter somebody at 11 that needs a follow-up. So then the crew team can look into it in the following morning and they go out without the officer just to follow up with the client. So that would be a crew response only. And so ideally, what I would like the pie chart to look like is to decrease the amount of time that all of these first responders have to go. And maybe it's just BPD and crew for a while until we can get our feet under us and see if crew can just go by themselves. Does that make sense?
Right, yeah, oh, absolutely. Okay. So just to follow up, and this is really for Corley, whenever Jason was going through some of these numbers, and you even alluded to the one about the resolution initial plan on the top right-hand side, what is your follow-up? Because you've got, I guess it'd be about 20%, I suppose, is what that is. If I can do my math in the head. You know, all those varied number or colored pie charts or pie slices in there. What do those relate to?
Okay, so flip over your sheet and I'll explain the follow-up dashboard. So the state allows us to follow up a crew client for 14 days following the initial event. So our case managers, the day after, you'll see that the highest responding day a week for a crew team is Monday. Our highest response time for follow-up is Tuesday. So what she does, every morning she goes through the calls that came in the night before. She responds to anyone who's in the crisis center, psych unit, something like that, that's in a spot that may be asked to leave that spot first. That's her first response. Sure. Then she follows up with anyone at home. So she can either go out to the home or she calls them to find up their follow-up. The crew team inputs in a note what they want to happen because they don't come back on shift until 10. So they might say this client is out of medication, they have no transportation, whatever it might be. And then that case manager follows up with them. Ideally, we have a warm handoff to a follow-up service, whether it's a mental health counselor. What we're finding, and Ariel can speak more to this, things that have surprised us is the aging population, people over 70 that we're responding to, and youngsters that we're responding to. We weren't anticipating those age groups, and so they've done a really great job, and our case managers of trying to navigate how to do those follow-ups. My data gal, who's on the call right now and probably screaming at me and the things she'd like me to say, but one of the things that she's working on this dashboard is being able to funnel in our referrals, and this is through our electronic health record. So below this, I would be able to show you, and I believe I sent it to Chris with just our initial 30 days worth or 30 clients worth, but it shows you where we're making all the referrals to. And so she's working to be able to pull that into this dashboard. So the next time you see this, it will say VA services had 10%, crisis center had 1%, whatever it's going to be.
That's what, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Neese, I'm just going to see whether Councilmember Ripsis or Boyette have anything. No. So Councilmember Neese?
Mayor, is the council looking at documentation that hasn't been given to all of us?
We did have something on our desk when we arrived that's a color chart. Is this the same as what was in our packet?
This one is more comprehensive. I'm sorry, Councilman Neese. The one that I sent out in the packet or that Jason and Chris submitted was from Thursday,
yeah.
Wednesday. This is as of today. And so this just has more updated data, and I can send it in an email also.
Yes, if we could please have that, it would have been helpful during this meeting and discussion.
Sure. Do we have that now by email that we could make sure that council members who are not with us in person can get that?
I've got hard copies, and Corlee said she'll email it to me, so we'll immediately forward it on to all of you, and that way you'll all have it electronically as well.
Okay, thank you. So Councilmember Neese, we only got the hard copy now, but we'll make sure you get an electronic version. Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, just a very quick question, as to this, not to rub salt in the wound for the council members who don't have this, but looking here at this insurance type pie chart, is the self-pay, is that actually self-pay, or is that how we refer to uninsured individuals? We're not collecting any dollars. Yeah,
No.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
So we're at least a 20% loss in terms of reimbursement.
Yeah,
covering costs of service.
52% of the clients are unfunded at this point. 48% are funded.
Well,
So-
I mean, private health insurance is not unfunded.
It does not cover mobile crisis at this time.
Oh, I
We're working
see.
on a
So all
contract.
of these other services don't, they're not billable. The crew is not billable.
Correct.
That's helpful. Thank you.
That's some of the rule changes we're looking for.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you very much. Anything else before we move to public comment on this item? Don't see anything, so this is an opportunity for the public to comment on the crisis response unit update that you just heard. If anybody would like to comment, please come to the podium. Same as before, we just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and address. Any public comment on item number 1? Before we move on, nobody's coming forward, no one is online, so we will close the public comment period, and also I think that's a wrap on item number 1, so we'll move on to item number 2, our Metropolitan Planning Organization MPO boundary map amendment, and turn it over to Laura after she brings up her PowerPoint. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, what we have for you is a housekeeping item for the Billings Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO. This item usually occurs after we go through a decennial census. A little bit of background, the Census Bureau looks at the decennial census and makes a determination if there needs to be boundary updates to the urbanized area. And so they mostly look at that through housing density, and then they have kind of 3 criteria working with Federal Highways and the Montana Department of Transportation to look at that, which is a reasonable distance from a large traffic generator land use, which is not residential. It's usually occurring with a large industrial, commercial, let's say a public institution like a school or a hospital. And then they try to, to their best ability, not to disrupt the current highway system. So this is the map that includes not only the boundary adjustment, and this is kind of hard to see, but there's an yellow area that's just outside the dotted line that was the 2010 boundary. So you see some areas have definitely tightened up, mostly because it's primarily rural area right now. However, we know that when the Johnson Lane interchange gets put in and the bypass gets completed, we're going to have more growth out there. We know as the inner belt loop gets completed and those new roadways gets in with the construction, that we're going to have development out there. These are always going to be ever changing, but as of right now, this is what is being proposed for a change in the area. The one area that we did have some concern with MDT was this area, let's see if I can get it right out here on King Avenue, that currently ends at approximately 44th, 48th, and we know that that area is it continues to boom monthly, it seems like. So they wanted to take.
Yeah.
I've not seen the presentation.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Neese. So we're going to check that. What we're looking at is the map, the first map in our packet, which was also available online. I don't think there's any change to this. So if we can't bring it up, then see if you can access that part of your packet.
That one, I got it. I'm looking at, so she can be a little more specific of where she's talking, then that would help us point.
Okay, great. So, Laura, he can't see your pointer.
Okay, so yes, so Councilmember Neese, this would be on King Avenue West. So you see the dotted line there on King Avenue West. They were proposing to remove a portion of that roadway from our urbanized area. And it's in an area that is currently under development. It continues development change. So we were able to work with them to keep that piece in. So again, the three generators we look at for amending this map based on the Census Bureau and federal highways is it has to be within a half a mile of an area. A half a mile of the urbanized area that includes the housing and those large trip generators, and it doesn't affect the highway system. That was the only area we had a concern with at this time. Can you advance? Thank you. And then map 2 is the It didn't. There should be a map 2 that is the final proposed map that shows the signature blocks.
So, Councilmember Neese and Tricky, we're working, we've got a little bit of frozen PowerPoint.
Yes. So yes, that second map is basically a clean version of this with the dotted areas shown as the new urbanized area and has signature blocks for the mayor and the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, Federal Highways, and MDT. So what we're asking the council to do next Monday night is to review and make a recommendation to PCC to adopt this new amended boundary, which would allow the mayor and the chairman of the BOCC to officially sign our new urbanized area map. And that's all I have. I will be happy to answer any questions.
Great, Laura. So just to kind of put it in a nutshell, at this point, there really is no disputed areas of the line. Helen MDT, Billings MDT, the county staff are all in agreement on the map that we have in front of us. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. We all met and went through each individual area to look at any impacts, and we didn't see any that would be impactful now. Obviously, again, the Billings bypass and the Urban Belt Loop, those will make impacts, and we have had to do boundary amendments in between census years, but I think this one will hold us over until the next decennial census, just based on the timing of the road developments and the timing of developments in the future. We'll be able to capture those areas after the next decennial census.
Okay, thank you. We'll ask council if they've got questions for Laura. Any questions before we invite the public to comment? Council members Neese or Tricky, I can't see you, but if you've got questions, please let us know.
Yes, I do have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Tricky, go ahead.
Could you tell us what the difference in the definition between the 2010 and the 2020 urban area boundary, why did that shrink?
Prior to that, this time when the Census Bureau reviewed the urbanized area, they looked specifically at housing density. So when you look at the areas that were yellow and now have shrunk up to some of those areas, if you look at those areas on the aerial maps, you'll see that there is no real residential development in those areas. They're very rural areas. There's no large traffic generators. There's no housing density. There's no institutions or anything like that that would generate traffic.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bernice.
Yeah, I know you addressed this a little bit about the inner belt loop, but or if I understand this, what you said is then we won't address, you think that no development or no changes will need to be made to this map until the next census, which is years from now, and the road's going to be done next year.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese. I think we're going to start seeing development. I don't know if it's going to be impactful enough as those large generators to trigger a boundary amendment at that time. It's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on and work with MDT and our federal highway partners to see if something triggers sooner that we need to have it looked at. We will definitely keep an eye on it.
Okay, so we may have to see amendments sooner than that, and they're open to doing amendments at that time?
Yes, we have done those in the past, where we've had to make, we made an amendment, I believe it was like 2016. We had to make a adjustment over on the northwest side of Billings with Copper Ridge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any questions for Laura, so we'll open up for public comment. Is there anybody who would like to comment on item number 2, the MPO map amendment? Any comment on item number 2? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period on item number 2. Council, anything before we move to item 3? Don't see any. So we've still got a few minutes. It'd be nice to deal with item number 3 before we take a break, if that's okay, Council. So Dave or whoever, we'll ask you to bring up item 3. Chris. You need that? Okay, that's fine, because we're still having some problems on the technology side of it. So Councilmembers Neese and Tricky, if you'll bear with us, we will take our break a little early then and come back. Let's aim for 7:25 if the technology cooperates and the gremlins are gone. So, all right, we'll see you in about 7 or 8 minutes. Are we ready?
I'm here.
Okay. All right, we'll get started again. All right, welcome back. We left off, we'd completed item number 2, but we were on item number 3, our technology replacement plan. Our IT director, Dave Watterson, is going to make this presentation, so we'll turn it over to David.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The one challenge I do see right now as I look up is that the council members here can see the council members who are remote because of the screen. Is that an issue or?
Only when we get to questions, Councilmembers Streaky and Neese, if we can't see you because we've got the PowerPoint up, please don't hesitate to just speak up.
Perfect.
We can now see you. You're off on the side.
It's kind.
Is.
It was sharing.
Oh, what screen can we are? I didn't see this one though.
Councilmembers Streaky and Neese, can you see the committee members' PowerPoint?
Yeah, I see I see committee members on one and plan overview on the other.
Yeah, we're seeing the preview page, not the slide page.
Okay, well, that's close enough for government work, as they say, so we'll work on it, but hopefully that'll be good enough. And we'll try to look for your little yellow hand when we get to questions. If we don't see that, please feel free to speak up. So with that, we'll turn it over to David.
Good evening, Mayor and
The first item on our technology replacement plan is that new PowerPoint equipment, or we're good there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here tonight to talk about the technology replacement plan. Most of you have seen this over the years. We put together a committee of people from around the organization. Each of these members do reach out and represent and work with either multiple divisions within their department, or in some cases, they work with multiple departments and help to assess their technology and the inventory of all their items and what items are presented each year to be included within the plan. I believe tonight Derek Yeager is here. And that's the only representative other than myself who is attending this evening. But I assure you that each of these people have worked very hard and helped represent each of their areas. So the plan is designed to encourage the replacement of computers and laptops and technology items prior to when they become obsolete or no longer meet our standards. It is a multiple year plan. We do look out over more than 1 year. It's established, we look at age, standards, cost benefits. The funding for these items comes directly out of the department's budget. I know you're also familiar with like the equipment replacement program. That program actually has a funding mechanism which coordinates over the course of years to have the money available. In this case, this is approved by council and then is included as part of their expenses for the FY25 budget. So you'll see this now and then again in December when you have the opportunity to approve it, and then again in the FY25 budget as it layers into their planning for the next year. Some of the highlights of what we're replacing this year, quite a few desktops, some high-end systems which generally go to engineers, GIS staff, some police department, things of that nature, the 911 center, some copiers and printers, quite a few laptops. We are moving more towards laptops for those people who are moving out of City Hall, Miller Building, Depot, things of that nature to the to the new City Hall, formerly Stillwater Building. And that's so that we can take advantage of a lot of the conference rooms and be able to move and work from various areas other than just our designated area. And as usual, quite a number of servers, which are, you know, the backbone for all the applications that are running throughout the organization. Wrong time. One of the largest items in our TRP for this year is a 911 telephone system. It's on the schedule to be replaced in FY25. And Derek has joined us this evening if at the end of you have some questions concerning that. We're reaffirming and renewing a 3-year cloud storage where we store all of our backups. We store Office 365 and email backups and things of that nature in what's called immutable storage, so that if we're hit with ransomware, you can't, that storage can't be written over or re-encrypted or altered in any way, even if we wanted to. So that saves us as a remote offsite backup that is sheltered from some of the harm of ransomware. We have a wireless network. As we look to move to our new facility, we need to reconnect to Four Dances, which is a tower up on the southeast side of town, which helps us connect to several of our facilities for backup network connections, and primary to the Public Works Belknap facility, which is our water plant service center, which houses obviously critical infrastructure. We have an email compliance vault, a 5-year contract or agreement that's coming due next year, so we'll renegotiate that. And some GPS equipment utilized by both distribution and collections and engineering, both the divisions within our Public Works Department. We continue to utilize hand-me-downs as much as possible. This program has gotten a little bit squeezed, and the reason I say that is in the past, we'd run a computer for 5 years, take it out of production, put it in a crime prevention center or senior citizens, employee kiosks, low-use environments, unexpected replacements, things of that nature. We still are looking to do that. Cybersecurity best practices are that you don't utilize machines beyond 6 or 7 years. So they're, instead of maybe getting 3 years of service, we're maybe getting 1.5 years or 2 years in the hand-me-down program. And that's because manufacturers don't continue to provide us with updated firmware or patches, and it provides an exposure from a cybersecurity standpoint. Another underlying factor to that is by October of 2025, Windows 10 will no longer be supported, which is the most common operating system on all of our systems, followed by Windows 11, which is where we're migrating. And that's not a migration that can happen quickly, so we've already engaged in making that move. Systems that are 5 years old today, chances are won't support Windows 11, and so by the time October of 25 hits, they're 7 years old, and so we need to keep this all in mind. But we do still try to utilize the hand-me-down program to save money, because where we can and where we can, so without providing an exposure from a cybersecurity standpoint. The plan as a whole is made up primarily, or 3/4, 65% capital and 35% O&M. Of the $895,000 for capital, a little less than half of that, about 45%, is the 911 phone system. It is a big impact to the overall total of our plan this year. As you can see, this slide shows how the investments are spread amongst the different departments throughout the organization. As you can see, Public Works has a large amount of infrastructure or technology replacement. Fire, information technology are some of the larger players. Again, fire is heavily impacted by that phone system. As we look at how it's happened over the years, you can see it generally goes up and down slightly. And then there are times when we have investments that increase our costs that are usually cyclical or based on a multi-year investment like the 911 phone system. And you can see if that were if that weren't in there, our plan would be, more around, I have the figure here, 9 million, or 979,000, which would be slightly less than last year. But again, we have these items that sometimes have a spike in our overall total. As we look at the years from 2000 FY22 on, you can see a steady increase. FY25, we increased again because of what we've been talking about. As we look at FY26, we project some things that may or may not happen, some large software changes that are identified as potential. Again, they may be pushed out. There are lots of times as people look at their technology, they say, oh, that copier, that printer, that high-end computer, that, well, the water plant has some really challenging names on some of their stuff. It's kind of interesting, but in their lab equipment, they might push that out. And some of these are fairly large dollar items. So FY26 being the next year beyond what we're planning for always looks bigger because of that. And next year, some of that stuff will get pushed to 27. In 27, I think in 28 is a large radio replacement forecasted. And and that of 1.8 million. Again, that's a temporary forecasting price on that replacement, and that may be pushed out or brought closer depending on where the public safety and see the need for that change on that radio system. And of course, the dollar amount could alter too. So with that, I ask if you have any questions.
Very good, thank you. Council members Boyette and Purinton, raise your hand. Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just looking at that pie chart, and it shows that the fire department and public works are about, well, almost 10 times higher than the police department. Does that mean that they use 10 times as many radios, or can you just give us a?
Well, in this case, it happens to be what is being spent this year. And if the fire department takes out 400,000 for the 911 system, their $418,000 chart, it becomes a smaller piece of pie than I'd be interested in eating. It'd be much smaller, be more like administration. Public Works has some larger items in there, some GIS or equipment or GPS equipment, quite a few servers. There's $113,000 worth of servers. They have some water meter reading equipment. Public Works is by a very large entity and they invest heavily in technology for efficiency and so they just have a lot of technology and they quite honestly are always a big player in this chart. IT is almost always a larger player, and the other departments vary depending on what cyclical is happening in their department and what's being replaced. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Councilmember Purinton.
He took my question, but I wanted to expand it just a little bit. And I understand that it's for the years. This is for 2025. I thought that the police department was wanting to trade out their computers that they have in their cars. Has that already been done, or is that already in, for this coming year?
Andy can speak a little bit to this also, but there's a public safety replacement plan that funds public safety systems, technology. They did replace out in FY22, they replaced out 15 of their MDTs. In FY23, they replaced out 40. And I know they're they're working towards a foundation where they provide or have an MDT available for each person,
That's what it
each
was.
of their officers. And they're making that move, and they're challenged by a large inventory of really good MDTs that are about 5, 6 years old. And so as the Windows 11 we talked about hits, and as just cybersecurity and meeting the needs of the officers, they are challenged with looking to, continue to replace to get new computers in all of the hands of the officers, because they have, the officers, the command staff, animal control. There's quite a large number of people that are all working, utilizing this technology.
So just one other question. And I just lost it. I don't like doing that. I'll come back.
Okay, we can do
Thank
that.
you.
Dave, maybe you just comment about what the transition to Windows 11 is going to look like. Changing an operating system for a big organization can be a pretty traumatic affair and costly. How does that work for us? Do we just have one license, and does everybody have to change at the same time? Do we have to buy Windows 10 for computers for a few months and then they switch over to 11? How does that transition, what does that look like?
So, Mayor, we have been working on this for a year already. So as we purchase new computers, we get the Windows 11 operating system at that time. So because of that, we'll have 4 years of new computers will be purchased with the Windows 11 operating system. We also, I believe Microsoft allows us to upgrade from 10 to 11 on existing licenses for those that aren't part of that were purchased with the Windows 10 operating system. And believe it or not, we do actually have a few computers that were purchased with previous operating systems to Windows 10. In that case, those will be disposed of, cycled out of production because they wouldn't even be able to run Windows 11. And quite a few of our Windows 10 machines, the older ones can't run Windows 11. So there's no upgrade. So that's why we're working through with departments on replacing out these older systems.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Neese, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilmember Purenton kind of talked about this, but I just want to clarify, because last year we talked a little bit about the MDTs and the police with smartphones. They're a whole lot less expensive. They're easier, cheaper to replace. And I was wondering if since the last year we talked about it, I know they invested heavily in a lot of new laptops for the police last year. Has there been any headway on that to start looking at that, running some demos on that, or some kind of test to see how that technology would work in Billings?
Thank you, Councilmember Neese. Our current software program that we've had for quite a number of years does offer a mobile called Shield Force, a program called Shield Force. They have tested it as to what the future is with that. At this time, I'm not aware of plans to move forward with that. But again, that will be a decision that will come out of the police department as to whether they will embrace that or not. And it is a very complicated situation because our current software we've had for many, many years, in fact, since the early 90s, in one version or another. And there's been some challenges with our software. And, at this point, there's a question as to whether the future will bring us with a extended relationship with that company, or whether we'll be moving away. And I think that has complicated the deployment of the product called Shield Force. I know next Monday night I'll be here with you and quietly hoping my consent item just goes through, but there will be a consent item based on a one-year contract with Tyler, that, and an MOU with Yellowstone County, which we share in the cost. And we're signing, with your approval, a one-year agreement with them. And then that allows us one more year to look at where we're going, what the organization decides to do along with Yellowstone County. Likely be looking at another 1 year the next year, but prior to this, we signed a 10-year, and so there was no appetite whatsoever from any of us to sign like a 5 or 10-year deal. So Tyler Technologies, who is the company with this, offered us a 1-year deal at a lower cost than what we had been paying at the end of our 10-year deal. And so we're presenting that to you next Monday night, or it's part of the consent agenda, along with an MOU that's already been approved by the county, that basically they pay us for their percentage of that, of the agreement that we then would sign with Tyler Technologies. So I think the technology is there. I think it's complicated in that if we invest a lot in the shield force and decide to go with a different solution, that it could be money lost or not utilized for its full extent of the investment. There's no easy answers here, but I think that's where we're at with this, is just getting a decision as to how we really want to move forward. And that lies mostly within the public safety agencies or departments.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think I'll rephrase that question to the chiefs in email to them, because I think that, and I'm glad to hear they're doing 1-year contracts, because as I understand, often that data is hard to get out of that. If that's the software they're using, it's hard to get and gather. We probably as a city need to look to change that and have that ability to move to a more smarter technology that is less expensive to have to replace all the time, and then the expensive laptops that rely on the Windows changing every 5 to 7 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rowan?
Sorry, I have a sort of similar question, and maybe you don't have a clear answer to this, but I know we've talked a little bit here at council about the need for significant storage space for body cam evidence. How's that going? Do you know? Are we in need of additional storage? Are we storing in the cloud? I mean, how's it going?
Councilmember Owen, the answer is yes. We have, the police department invested in a product called Digital on Cue. So the police car and body camera footage all go into a similar server. They go in different ways, but they store there for their retention period. That server is a shorter period. And that space just kind of rolls over like a bucket as things get older. But as things go in there, they're identified by public safety officers and command staff as needing to stay. We need this video. This is tied to a case or whatever triggers that. It then will flow to a Digital on Cue server, which is located in a different facility. That Digital on Cue server has quite a lot of storage. And it is tied actually to a cloud storage, which allows us, basically, we pay by the megabit, and it's become quite affordable. But in this case, because of the nature, it's not, our family pictures. This is public safety information. We utilize storage which meets all of the DOJ requirements and CISA and that type of thing. But it allows us to expand our storage almost endless. And it, as mentioned before, is of the same company that we use for our backups, and it is immutable storage also, so that those videos and pictures and anything that comes into evidence, the Digital on Cue is, as it sounds, it's anything digital. It's pictures, it's scanned documents, it's videos, it's any of their digital evidence, and it goes to that server. It's then again backed up in the cloud. So I believe the storage issue for that is been resolved.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Councilmember Trachey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Dr. Watterson, I think, so in the past, well, let me put it this way. Moving forward, as we move forward with, for example, the police department's information system, one of the biggest challenges is its ability to interact with other systems, like the judicial system, the state law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that something that our current vendor is capable of doing? And I guess my real question is this the budget line that we would be looking at to put the experience, to hire consultants or whatever it is that we need to do in order to make that type of a thing happen?
Mayor, Councilmember Chiriki, as far as interfacing, the current system is not to be, underestimated or identified as not meeting the needs. It is been in existence for a long time. It's continued to update. It does meet all of the standards and reporting and connectivity, et cetera. Having said that, there have been challenges which are been identified and frustrations that are real. And I think it's important that we have the discussion as to how to move forward. When ready to move forward, then a committee would be put together or extended. There has been a committee looking at solutions and discussing things and just kind of learning what we can. But I think there would have to be some type of step forward that would involve looking at the budgeting side along with the software. I have done computer systems and migrations and things of this nature for over 35 years, and I will say that this would be one of the largest I'll ever deal with, and I may not, because I may not be here, and depending on the timeline of this, but it is enormous between the police records and police mobile and 911 and fire records and jail and sheriff's department and the list goes on. It is enormous. It's a huge undertaking, and it's not that it shouldn't be done, but again, I think that's a conversation, and if there's any ask in the FY25, I'm not aware of it, but that doesn't mean there won't be. And I projected it in the TRP out, but again, with this dollar amount associated with that, if the public safety departments come forward with that, it would be, I'm sure that we'd have a lot of meetings between now and the budget time. I anticipate that it would be in an FY26 or 27, but again, that's not my call to make, and I'm not speaking on the behalf of them.
I just want to make sure that I understand what you just said. So basically what you're saying is if we need outside experience, expertise, resources and stuff like that to help figure out how to make this transition, that's an ask that's going to have to come from public safety?
Or the committee designated to shepherd this forward.
So there is a committee existing right now to shepherd this forward?
Not to my knowledge, there's not an active one, but again, I would refer that to the public safety directors.
Thank you.
Okay, council, thank you very much. Let's open up for public comments, see if there's anybody who'd like to comment on the technology replacement plan. If there is, please come forward. I don't see anybody online, and no one is coming to the podium. So we'll close the public comment period on the technology replacement plan. This will be on our agenda, or is on our agenda for 1 week from today. Is that correct? No.
Mayor, the 1 week from today it was a related topic. It is the
Oh, that's the
Tyler
MOU.
Technologies 1-year agreement for our public safety software. I believe this is tentatively scheduled in December to be brought back as an opportunity for the council to approval along with the ERP. And I'm not sure, depending on where the CIP sits in that, but it'll be in that package.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Council, nothing else? We'll move on to the main item of the evening. Councilor Neese had a question?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you.
Go ahead.
More for discussion since the work session on this issue. And maybe I'm wrong in this, but I thought I recall that the Police Citizens Advisory Board had some role in helping ensure there was some kind of good data opportunities that the police could be able to report. And I'm wondering if they're involved in this whole data cross conversation we just had about making sure the software is, that board's included in that conversation.
Chris, can you comment? Do you have any information on it?
I can tell you, I believe Councilmember Neese is correct that if you look at the overall scope of that advisory board, that technology or reporting is one of those components. Without the chief or Kevin here, they're the ones who attend those, and they would have to report. They could report back to us as to what engagement there's been in those meetings on this topic. I don't know the answer to that question, but yes, it is in the scope that the council adopted when it created that advisory board.
Yeah, that's my recollection as well. Councilman Farrington?
Councilman Member Neese, the meetings that I've attended, they have not discussed that. And it took them this long, I think, to get a full board. I'm not sure if we still have one person missing, but I think that would be a good thing to bring back to their attention, that this is something that, that was part of their scope of study. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure they're aware, the chiefs are aware that they can actually involve that committee. So before another committee is formed, that would be part of that. So thank you.
Okay, before we move to the...
Can you make a comment on that?
Oh, okay, just a reminder, we've got to get to our CIP. Councilmember Tricky and Councilmember Joy.
Oh, hey, we've got hours until midnight.
Yeah,
That's
what I'm afraid of.
Just like with the energy, I forget what it's called, but the Energy Commission that we put together, that is filled with experts that are really on top of what's going on in that area. It's a very technical field. And the one that we're talking about here right now, the data systems behind the police and justice systems and stuff like that, that is also a very technical area. And I would not expect your average citizen to be able to walk into a meeting and be able to coherently add to that conversation other than at a very, very, very high level, which is important because, at a certain level, we need to be able to have that community interaction and involvement stuff of it needs to be a part of where we're going with this. But how it happens, what it looks like, what's going on with it, what's going on in the background, really would need a committee with some very serious expertise in the area of data systems, migrations, et cetera. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It may be my misunderstanding, but the Citizens Police Advisory Committee, in terms of data, was to look at what possibly the police department, based on the CPSM study, that was an identified area where there was maybe I don't want to say deficiency, but there was a gap. And this Police Advisory Committee would look into that gap that was identified by the CPSM study. I believe that what I hear being discussed is really police department, fire department, sheriff's department, justice department, state agencies of public safety, where I don't think that's what was identified in the police citizen advisory committee. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on then to item number 4, our capital improvement plan. Council, this is a 180-page document. It's after 8 o'clock. I doubt we're going to get through every page. We're going to get a presentation from Andy. Big picture, also he'll address some of the recommendations or conversation with the budget committee. So we want to hear from Andy. We want to give the budget committee opportunity to comment on their specific discussions as well. There are then 6 specific topics. We're not going to be able to dig into each one of those, but we've got staff members from all of those subject areas who've been patiently sitting here all night. So I guess what I would recommend is, rather than getting, when we get to that point, into the weeds too deep on any individual item, that we try to give a heads up to department heads and department representatives about areas of concern or questions, and not take the time to try to drill down into each one of those, but unless we've got the time, but at least try to identify them so staff can get back to us during the week, maybe by email, or at least come to our next work session ready to address those specific issues. That'd be my recommendation. Otherwise, we're not going to probably get very far tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy, who is handing out some additional copies.
Presents, yeah.
Okay. Is this any different from what was in the packet?
It is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
It's in black and white, so that's.
Okay, so this
I only have
is just a
6
hard
copies
copy.
here, so if you don't get one, please, I will happily print more. So please, if you want one, let me know.
I have one in from my packet.
Okay.
December?
Say it again.
In December.
Yes. Yes, yes, you will be voting on this.
You don't get
He was trying to get rid of it.
The other request I'd have for council members, if you were asking any questions at any point in our discussion tonight, that you try to make specific reference to the page number. Otherwise, we'll be hopelessly lost. So everybody understood that, I'm sure. Back to Andy.
I tuned in earlier, it was. I promise.
Earlier it was. And now it's not again on that share.
Okay. Oh. All right, well, I hear Community 7 isn't broadcasting this, so all my fans out there. Well, I'm sorry, they can't see the screen, but my apologies to all those viewers. So I have the FY 25 to 29 CIP, and all of you have been through this a couple of times at a minimum. So I take a little bit of a different approach, and also we have the Budget and Finance Committee this year, which I don't believe we had last year at this point in time. So we brought this to them. There we go. Hey, I can't see it. We brought this to them at our meeting in October, and went through the projects. There was a lot of discussion, and I frankly didn't have answers for. And so the bulk of tonight's presentation is, those are the topics that were generally of interest. So I tried to get all the answers for you guys on those and focus on that. We are going to meet, the Budget and Finance Committee meeting is going to occur on November 14th. There's some scheduling issues I have on the 15th in this slide, but we just settled on the 14th in the afternoon, so that notice will be forthcoming. Then we'll be back to you at the next work session 2 weeks from today. And then I believe for council adoption on December 11th, or consideration for adoption on December 11th is the plan. That may be upsetting for some people, I don't know. Okay. And that's it, so thank you very much.
Very good. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, good night, everyone.
Oh, it's turned off, that's why. All right, there we go, I got it. Okay, so briefly, the CIP, as, again, you guys have all been through this, so this is more for the benefit of the public, but it's a 5-year plan that identifies the capital projects anticipated over the next 5 years. really to, prioritize what projects we want to do, where we want to start developing funding mechanisms, and either setting aside funding or anticipating borrowing for projects. Capital projects in the CIP are projects that are more than $25,000. These are typically new construction, property acquisition, or rehabbing existing assets that we have. These do not include vehicles, technology, we have separate plans for those, or routine maintenance. I'm gonna move our Zoom participants off for now. We'll bring them back in a little bit. All right. So the 5-year CIP is $588 million, broken up by these departments. These are the ones that are usually in there. These are your capital intensive areas, typically parks and public works, aviation, transit, making up the bulk, and then planning with some generally transportation projects. Broken out by year, you see FY25 is $85 million. If this were adopted as is, we would take that $85 million, and that would be kind of what starts the base of the budget next year. Fully expect there will be some changes to this, but that's what the 5-year plan looks like. This project does include $143 million of bonded projects that's on the ballot for consideration tomorrow. So, depending on the outcome there, we may see something quite different in the future. So I just want to highlight some of the major FY25 projects. The bonded projects we just took and spread them equally over the 5 years. At this point, it was premature to, really say this one there and this one there. So that's how they're in there. So there's $27 million in FY25. There's some water storage improvements in Zone 1, the downtown area. Pretty large project there. Continuing with our water and wastewater main replacement program. In FY25, we also have fleet expansion and wash bays. This was not in the presentation to the Budget and Finance Committee, but we confirmed it should have been, so that's new to you guys. But you guys have heard about this. This is would create a dedicated CNG work area, and in order to do that, we'd have to move some wash bays around, and so that's why there would be new wash bays as well. Oh yes, compressed natural gas, which is only used in our solid waste fleet currently.
Mayor,
Councilor Renese?
is the slide show supposed to be moving? Because I still just see the capital improvement plan, first slide.
Andy is working on that.
Is the
Can you
presentation in our packet? I see the major 25 projects.
Okay. Yeah,
And that's what we're looking at.
Is it working?
Yeah, no, of course not.
Is the presentation an email that we could just follow along that way?
It is not, no. Is it advancing now for you?
Now it is.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. I will email it so you can catch up on those slides as well, but I haven't emailed it to you yet.
And if you include the whole council,
Yeah.
just so we have that.
Yep, of course. So kind of rounding out, I just cut off at $2 million, the projects in FY25, some additional wastewater projects, beginning design on runway 725 extension. That's a 2-year project there. And then beginning design work for Grand Avenue, 43rd to 62nd. That one's actually would be funded through our urban funds, the state of Montana, but largely directed by the city of Billings and the city council. And then phase 2 of the Wicks Lane storm drain project. So the topics that were, I'll say, of major focus for the Budget and Finance Committee, there were these kind of 7 areas. In your memo, I tried to encapsulate generally what the questions were, so we'll go through them. The first one was co-location of city facilities, and we talked about this last year. Again, at the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, what are we doing to, co-locate multiple departments where appropriate in certain areas, and what's it look like? So most of the departments that are involved in the CIP met, I think that was last week or 2 weeks ago, and kind of talked about this in a little more detail, saying, hey, what's in the plan right now? Does it make sense that we should be adding a additional facility or storage area there? Or should we be looking at, a BOC, Billings Operations Center 2, 3, 4, whatever? Generally, the consensus was expanding to add an entire new BOC somewhere else in the city. At this point, not in the scope of the 5-year CIP. There's a lot that would come along with that. Do we need additional equipment, FTEs? What all goes along with that? And so it wasn't realistic to put in there. Could we look at adding additional storage locations? I think that could be utilized for some departments, namely Parks was the one that we thought could work, but when comparing it to other projects in the CIP, it wasn't as high of a priority, right? We can keep operating the way we are. There are some projects, though, that we can't keep using, that facility or that playground because it's going to deteriorate. So the question is, pull it out or replace it. Well, we want to keep having these amenities. So when looking at those priorities, it just didn't quite fit. Going forward, we thought maybe one of the better approaches would be, as we start to place fire stations, they're largely going to be the ones leading new locations throughout the city, just given the nature of their operations. That would be the time we would really want to look in and say, hey, do we want to size up the land and, add additional storage facilities or, operation centers out of there? We felt like that would probably be the good opportunity to really examine that. In the CIP, there's 2 projects presently in the 25 to 29 CIP, Airport Operations Building, as well as a heated shop and break room remodel out at Belknap. And these were the 2 projects that spurred this discussion. At the airport, the FAA is pretty restrictive with what you can do there. And they require full market cost be charged, which, that's fine. But there's a lot of issues with security compliance, and you couldn't have a parks facility inside the airport because it just wouldn't function well to maintain a secure perimeter. It doesn't really work very well for co-locating facilities. It kind of defeats that purpose because you can't utilize shared areas because the FAA portion in the security is secure, and then the non-aviation related items would be outside of that. The heated shop and break room, that's planned in FY29, potential for consideration of some expansion there, but its location is not really ideal. It's out at the Belknap site, not really a good location for adding on. The project that was in last year's CIP that is currently in this year's budget is a salt and stand storage out near the airport. It's south of the highway there, where we store a whole lot of snow in the wintertime. And the concern there is utilizing much of that land for buildings and then limiting our ability to store snow. My understanding is in a heavy year that we are pushing capacity for the snow we can store there. There is some adjacent parkland that could be considered, but that was really all that was identified there. Excuse me. The next topic was Parks and Recreation and public lands. Specifically, as I mentioned earlier, 5-year CIP does include $143 million of bonded projects, as well as the non-GO portions that are the non-bonded portions. They're spread evenly over the 5 years, as I mentioned. There are $9.4 million funded through the general fund. With the elimination of Park District 1, the general fund would be funding those projects. 1.7 million of that is funded through other funds, primarily PMDs, Amen Park, and then some cash in lieu. There were an additional $3.5 million of projects that the Parks Department identified and had proposed. And frankly, in order to balance this, I said, hey, you got to prioritize these. We can't do that much. And so they had pulled these projects from their initial proposed plan And largely it was based upon the idea that I had mentioned earlier, we can continue operating without doing these things. Now they improve efficiency, they will certainly help with operations, but when prioritized against other projects, they felt like these were not needed. This shows the parks CIP by funding source. Presently, the yellow is the bonded projects. Not really all that helpful, but if I pull that out, you see the general fund there in gray at around $1.5 million each year, except for in FY29, and that is because the 2 splash pads are recommended for replacement in that year, and they will, depending on the outcomes of the aquatics facility or the aquatic study that's being done, that will kind of dictate what that price looks like. But right now they're in there at the high end. I don't recall what that is, but that was the spray, the recirculating splash pads, which were the most expensive. So that goal was to try to keep it somewhat consistent with where we were with PD1. Fire Station 9, so this project is in there over 3 years, and the first 2 years are funded through Public Safety General Fund, I believe $100,000 in FY25, and the idea here is really to fund land acquisition, some site design, and really design a fire station. FY27 includes the construction. Presently, it's in there as grant funded. I think that this slide here. I don't have it in there. As it is, grant funded for construction in FY27. We are not aware of a grant that exists today that would do this. Senator Tester has mentioned that he's trying to make funding available for something like this. The idea here is we get design, we have something that is grant eligible should those funds or that those grants become available. If not, we'll be looking to other options, not building a fire station, public safety levy, bonding, whatever those options may be, but we'll have an idea on cost, design, location. That's the plan on that. There was some question about, demonstrate what do we need? And so I had the chief try to educate me on this, and I did my best to capture it here, but he generally said, you're looking at calls per day, distance, and then the response time. Those are your metrics. And so I have, best practice or recommendation is 3 calls per day for a station or to an area, the distance a mile and a half road miles, and a response time for the first unit in 4 minutes or less. Presently in that southwest quadrant, which, is, I think new Costco area, that's the area they were focusing on. We're getting 5 to 6 calls per day, kind of split between those 2 stations, 5 and 7, I believe. 3 to 4 miles of road miles, and then it's about 8 minutes and 10 seconds average response time. Expo Drive and 25th Street pedestrian crossings. So these projects are in the CIP. The 25th Street Bridge pedestrian crossing, we've been working with BNSF to secure access, and I think Wyeth has some knowledge on that. We pursued this project 10 years ago and had everything going forward except for when bids came in. So we have submitted a grant now for a significant portion of funding, and we won't know that outcome until, I believe, early next year. This is also included as part of the bond package. Expo Drive, the question was what's been done and what could be done to make crossing over there more grant eligible. So far, feasibility study was done in 2013, and that's about it so far. Some design work could be done to make this project more grant ready and really refine the costs. We don't have a funding source identified for that. It's currently, I believe, in the 28 or 29 of the CIP. It's been in that 5th year for quite a while because it's kind of been waiting for somebody to do development to say, hey, we have this plan, let's move forward. Potentially you could look to the eBird for some funding there. There's not a lot of available funds in that district, but to get to 30% design, it may be possible to fund that portion of the project. There were some questions about landfill projects. The specific question about cell expansion that is in the CIP was, can cardboard and composting push that back? Public Works is here, of course, to expand on this, but, there may not be a significant enough impact to push this cell expansion back, but perhaps 1 year. I think they're kind of waiting to do some analysis on that to really see what that looks like, but I think when they're looking at cell expansion, it was long-term over the life of the landfill. There's a question on the status of the compost facility. They're waiting on a key element, or what is it? Key equipment to arrive and anticipated delivery this summer. And then the MRF, Material Recovery Facility. This project was eliminated last year due to a lack of market for recyclables. And the question was, why isn't this in the CIP? And it was not in there last year as well. Skyway Drive Water Loop, this was pushed back a year from last year's CIP, largely just based upon an anticipated development. If development occurs quicker than we anticipate, then we would push it forward. But that is why that was pushed back 1 year. And then the stormwater projects. So the projects in the CIP anticipate council adopting the rates for the best practice level of service. If best practice rates are not adopted, this CIP, the projects in here would have to be changed. And then this comes to my conclusion, but the CIP is available online, as well as the GIS map that shows the projects. We've had that going for a few years now. Again, November 14th, the Budget and Finance Committee will meet to further discuss this. We'll be back at the 20th work session, and then back in December for council consideration. I think Mayor and I talked about this, just giving it opportunity for Budget and Finance Committee to talk, make comments. I do have this following slides with all department projects. If we want to go to those, they're on pages 6 through 9 of your CIP. But I'll turn it over to you, Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Appreciate your work on this. Appreciate the involvement of the Budget Committee as well. Council, I guess what I would suggest is that since we had some specifics from items that were a point of discussion with the Budget Committee, we turn it to the Budget Committee to see if they wanted to comment further on those. And then I'll give it to the rest of the council for kind of open season on questions for Andy. But let's start with what we've just heard, and either big picture from 30,000 feet or the specifics that we just heard about. So who would like to start us off from the Budget Committee? Councilmember Rowan?
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Andy, as always, for good Budget and Finance Committee conversations. I think we appreciated your responsiveness and the quick turnaround on what I think was a pretty lengthy list of questions and notes. So really appreciate it. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I think we did discuss in more detail that got missed that maybe you want to comment on. Just because they're things that council has also discussed, so it might be useful. And then just wanted to sort of clarify a little bit the recollection of a particular conversation. So we had talked to some extent about Dealer Park, about some of the ongoing maintenance issues, the turf changes, the ongoing community questions about making that more multi-use. So I think maybe if you wanted to just highlight any things that have happened on that, or Chris can, if he likes. And then we had talked about this last year. We talked about it in the Budget and Finance Committee, and I think there's been agreement that it doesn't appear the CIP does, or that future CIPs will include general planning studies any longer, but that we will track those in some sort of appendix or attachment or something. Is that?
It has been removed. There was one in there, and it's not in there anymore. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I think we will keep a list somewhere so that council members remember those broader planning studies, not project-specific studies, which may be included in the capital cost, but the general sort of aquatic study, parks comp plan, those sort of longer-term vision things will be tracked in a separate document rather than here in the CIP. And then the last comment before I ask Mike or Ed to jump in is just wanted to characterize, I think, our conversation around the 25th Street Bridge and Expo Drive a little bit differently. I think we had talked about the fact that the 25th Street Bridge project went up dramatically in cost since the last time the planning studies had been done. I think like a tripling of the cost. And so the concern was that Expo Drive similarly has sort of sat for a while, and maybe we need to do some updated work so that we understand if the costs have gone up, and that we would be in a better position for that sort of grant funding. And the particular nexus here, I think, was the progress of the Fifth Street corridor. That there's been a belief that the Expo Drive pedestrian crossing needs to wait for some private development on that lot across the street from Metro Park, but that perhaps with the acceleration of the Fifth Street corridor project, that might itself be a catalyst for improving that just sort of general connectivity through that area. I think Councilmember Gulick rightly said the Fifth Street corridor has its own value, but I certainly am of the belief that we create better connection between the Heights and Ebird if we get that pedestrian bridge in place, and that if we're going to continue to prioritize the Fifth Street corridor over other projects, losing that connectivity to the Heights is probably not a good idea. So that, I think, was what I recall for the committee conversation. But otherwise, I think you were fantastic in being responsive. Mike or Ed, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Gulick, Boyette, Councilmember Gulick.
I'll just add, I think in the transportation ones, we did see added since that committee meeting in fiscal year 2029, the 6th Avenue North multi-use trail. Again, that's a really critical connector between the city and the sort of downtown area and the Ebird area and the Heights. When I was on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, that was something that was a real focus of that. And I think Billings TrailNet was also making a real, that was a key project. And then I think we were told that it was MDT is going to be redoing that intersection, and we'll wait until that. And then it just sort of disappeared. It's back on there, but it is still quite a ways out. So I guess that something that is a concern for me. But I think I really appreciate the department's responding to the questions we had in the budget committee in the time for this discussion here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, tomorrow will be will either validate this, or do you have a plan B in case it doesn't for the CIP?
I have no plan Bs. No, I was just, no, well, my plan will be to adjust accordingly if needed. But I think there certainly will be a lot to discuss, whatever happens tomorrow, right? I mean, how are we going to prioritize projects will be the question, whether the bond passes or not. Because I think that, well, throughout, but certainly in parks.
Thank you, Councilor Owen, on that topic for Councilor Joy.
If you had a second to talk about Dealer Park.
So I remember talking about Dealer Park, and I don't have any questions written down about it. So I apologize. I was probably so involved in the conversation I forgot to write it down. I do have a question written down about the 6th Avenue Trail project, and I feel like I may have emailed about it, or I'll stall long enough that they can talk about it and on the status and plan.
And I can cover Dealer.
Yeah, please do, because I don't remember.
So specifically tied to the CIP, I think the questions relative to Dealer, and we have had a couple meetings, both with kind of on-the-ground partnerships with the Mustangs, but then also I had a lengthy conversation last week, or actually it was the same day, with ownership of the Mustangs. So often people don't recall, so $90,000 a year is set aside into a maintenance fund. I'm going to keep this simple. There's probably some better, more specificity, but basically that 90,000 comes 60,000 from the Mustangs, 30,000 from the city general fund. That money goes in for capital maintenance of that facility. That's how we replaced the screen, the scoreboard that needed to be, that was our largest single investment in the time that I've been here over the past 5 years. The next very significant investment planned is the replacement of the field. to a non-Major League Baseball fan, I didn't realize you would replace a field, grass or otherwise, every X years. So we've been setting money aside in preparation for that. The conversation is, though, expanded to include MSUB, an expanded use by them of the field, higher level of use of Legion and/or high school baseball. That's an unknown, but known as a question mark in Montana. And how would that affect Mustangs and expanded use of the facility? And so the conversation of who would participate, we do not have enough cash reserved. It's several hundred thousand. Are we in the 400,000 to 500,000? Yeah. In the $500,000 neighborhood. Turf field's going to cost more than $500,000. So on the capital side, is it going to be turf, or is it going to be a grass replacement when we've got enough money saved up to do that? The turf will expand more uses. The other small maintenance things that people have brought up, they really are maintenance things that we can do with our fund. You know, paint and foam and the small stuff. And that discussion has been had for those repairs. And then a new one that has come in, I don't have a ballpark on price yet, Mike may, is netting, right? So unfortunately, we had some very unfortunate incidents this year where along the foul lines, people have been hit by balls. So we're getting pricing on netting expansion. That would be a part of what we use that fund for. So those are some capital components that we don't have answers for yet. We don't know exactly but we are working on those discussions, believing the netting needs to happen before next season. That trigger needs to be pulled, and in this off season, make a determination, do we want to go to AstroTurf or turf field, and who might be partners in fundraising to be partners in the facility. Two more things I'm sorry to just touch on is if you've been looking out at future work session agendas, you would have seen that on November 20th. I've got we decided to move it. Billings Mustang's coming here at our next work session, but we did decide to wait until the first of the year to do that. What Dave Heller, the owner of the Mustangs, wants to have a conversation about what it looks like to get back into affiliated baseball. Affiliated meaning having the Mustangs move into a high A Major League Baseball affiliation and what the requirements are for upgrades, capital upgrades that will now need to happen to the facility if a Major League team were to sign a contract to do that. So that's out there being worked on. And the last thing I'll touch on kind of comes back to that turf field is working with two local entities. I'll leave them unnamed publicly, but entities that work in the event venue arena to sign some kind of a contract with the city where they would be the promoters and be putting on events. That's not, whether it's concerts or things like that. Our Parks Department, that is not their world, scheduling that. So we have two, both local folks who have work in that arena, and then we've been having ongoing conversations with them of what would a contract look like with them so that they could be the event promoters for the space, obviously in concert with all those other users.
Okay, thank you for that very thorough update, Chris. I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Joy and then Councilmember Purington. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question about page 9. That's on the paper copy. I'm not sure if that's the same for the electronic. And it's the Suburra unimproved streets improvements, and it's FY 26-27, it's 1.1 million. I was just wondering, for those 2 years, I was wondering if I could get some information about which streets are to be improved in that, or are they just placeholders? And then the second half of that question is, what percentage of the funding is anticipated to be from the Suburra, and what part of it will be from the residents in terms of an SID for those improvements? Thank you.
Debbie or Jennifer, are you capable, or assuming Andy, that's above Andy's pay grade?
All right, I'm still finding it here, but it looks like the streets included next are Vaughn Lane and portions of Mitchell, Bruce, and Hillview. And then, wait, I think those are done, right?
Those are done.
Those are done. I think we need to update this. So it says next is Morgan, Ryan, and Stevens. And then we don't have anything after that. All the funding, though, is Suburra funding. It's tax increment. We can get you a better list tomorrow, though.
Thank you.
Jennifer, that all is Suburra funding, is that based on the decision we made last year, or is this an assumption by staff based on that past action, or did we specifically decide that before? Understand my question?
I think the mayor's question is if we move to the assumption that anytime there's a gravel street going to a fully urban street that is going to be paid for 100% by Suburra.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're asking us, is our CIP set up around that assumption now that we no longer create SIDs, partnerships with the city, we build their street with all TIF money?
Because as you remember, staff's original recommendation was to go 50-50. I lost that battle because I agreed with you, but so I'm just asking, have we already had a specific vote on those particular streets, if you remember?
We have not had another vote. The guidance that we received from council before was that they were not interested in us charging an SID for any of that. So it was 100% Suburra, 0% SID, and that's what we've gone forward with since.
Okay, I'll just state my recollection, which was we decided that for those streets, but we did not give direction for time into memorial, or whatever the phrase is, for the rest of our life. But so I would recommend we come back to that point at some point, or that issue at some point. Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Purinton?
And I don't want to get too far in the weeds with this one, but going back to Dealer Park, you know, I've always been concerned that the Mustangs pay $60,000, we pay $30,000. And so with our $30,000, we are the ones that are required, if you will, to make all of these turf changes and all of that. Is that true?
We use that pot that the 90 goes in for the capital maintenance of the facility.
So it's part of theirs?
Absolutely. Their 60 goes in and our 30.
How long has it been 60,000? I thought it's been there ever since you've been here.
It has been. Just before the pandemic, we were having conversations about both of us moving that number up by the need to do so with the pandemic and what happened with baseball. It hasn't moved.
And so when do we see that because I don't remember we've ever seen that contract.
Yeah, that contract was signed prior to my arrival here. I think it's a 10-year, the contract we have with the Mustangs. It hasn't expired. We did start renegotiating it again before the pandemic and changes because there was some desires on both sides to see some things tweaked, all for setting up the future. So.
Thank you.
Chris, if I can just comment about dealer and the possibility of events. You had a long list of things that were being discussed. One of the things that's not on the CIP is any sort of field covering. And for council members to know, protection of the field is Mike Pigg's job one. He lays awake at night worrying about whether the Gophers have got into that field, and having a giant concert is worse than a lot of Gophers. So that's a big issue. But if promoters need to cover rent material to cover. They have to ship it in from other parts of the country and put it all down. And it's a couple $100,000 to rent it. And so at some point, the promoters, the city may want to have some sort of discussion about, I don't know, acquiring that so you didn't have to spend $250,000 to rent it each time. It's a huge barrier that prevents events from happening there. That's just a comment.
Mayor, the only thing I would add is my understanding in those conversations, significant difference between if we have I'll just keep using the broad term, AstroTurf, a fake grass infield, outfield, than a natural infield, outfield, relative to what you've got to do to be able to do multi-purpose use on it. The natural is subject to the kind of war stories that Missoula experienced in the last couple of years and cost them a lot of money. But so whether it's cover or going to AstroTurf, that is a key decision to be made here over the next 12, 18 months. Which way are we going to go and who will be partners in that? Because MSUB would like to use the facility more often, and they need to use it earlier in the season. And to use it earlier in the season, they really need to go AstroTurf, and at least the indication is they're willing to be a fundraising partner with us and others to make that happen. So it's a part of that dialogue.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, if there's nothing else from the Budget Committee on those particular items, we'll just go back to council. I don't know how to proceed. We can go item or category by category, but we're probably not prepared really to do that. So I'm going to throw it back to council. If they've got other things they want to address, in particular questions for staff, because we're now at 8:45. I guess my recommendation, we try to wrap up around 9 o'clock. But do you have anything else? I know I have at least one other question for Andy about the 25th Street Bridge discussion. That is, as I think it was probably Council Member Owen pointed out, has grown exponentially. It's now at a $5.4 million price item. So, one question is what, carat gold was that bridge going to be plated in? And I assume it is, assumes a brand new bridge and not use of the Ringer Bridge, which is a bridge that's ready to go and has a lot of character, and the price is right. So Wyatt, do you want to comment on how we're going to bring that price down and the use of the Ringer Bridge?
Yes, Mayor and Council, thank you. I don't know about the first part of what you said about bringing the price down, but I can give you a brief update, and Debbie can chime in as well. The new estimate for that project came about as we were quickly preparing a grant, a Connecting Communities grant that we submitted, and that Debbie basically led with our new Ted Wilson, our new coordinator, and the downtown Billings folks. And so the estimate, and that's partly why if you look in the CIP in the past, we had a $2.5 million estimate, and now we're at that $5+ million. That actually still includes using the Charles Ringer Bridge. And actually with the grant, it's a benefit because we're able to show that we're recycling an existing bridge, and also we're pretty sure that we're using steel that is American steel, which is a requirement for the grant anyway. So there's some advantages to that. But yeah, that is the new estimate, and maybe Debbie can weigh in more on the details. But that is what we've adjusted up to for that. But it includes the whole project. It includes elevators at the two support towers, which we had originally, we looked at ramps, but they were way too intrusive in terms of the depot and everything because of the slopes that you have to do there. And then we had proposed in the last run at this 10 years ago, sort of these funicular lift things. And so now it's more of a real elevator type system. So there's some changes, but it is using that bridge. It's still doing all the same things with the railroad. We've worked with them from the beginning, height, fencing, safety materials, the whole works, the right of way, the span and stuff like that. So that's all the same in terms of the discussions with BNSF.
Okay, Debbie, did you want to comment, or does that cover it? No, she says she's good. All right, we won't. Okay, other questions, comments? Council members Joy, Owen, and Gullit.
Thank you, Mayor and the Council. I just had a question about.
And then Councilmember Neese, I apologize. I see you.
Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. Just a quick question about Fire Station number 9. The funding source for the fire station is not identified, but I was wondering, what location are you, do you have, is there enough development on this idea that you have a location that you are looking at, or is it still too far in advance to ask that question? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, so the place that we're looking at precisely is 48th and Hesper, where the reservoir is. Had a lot of conversation with Andy, Debbie, and see how we can make this thing work. But the land is already there, so why not use that? And it was also identified in an earlier report that was done, a consulting report that was done back in 2018 for us, that exact area. And that was 5 years ago, and it's coming true.
Just to follow up.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up, what does that make your response time to Josephine's Crossing? And because that's highly residential now, previously it wasn't. So how is that in terms of your response time? Thank you.
Unfortunately, there's no easy way to get there for us. Logistically, Station 5 has that area now, which is on 24th Street West, across from Chick-fil-A. And so that would remain as the responding unit for that. Honestly, the real answer is in the future, and that is putting a station on the south side of the freeway at some point to answer to all that development that's going down there. But right now, we're identifying the 48th and Hesper area, or Shiloh Crossing area, if you will, as the next immediate need.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmembers Owen, Gullit, and Neese.
Mayor, I have just a couple questions, and I'll start with you since you're here. So we have in here Fire Station 9 planned for 2027, if there's a funding source identified.
Sure.
And I think we've got renovations underway at Fire Station 8.
Correct.
From your perspective, though, Chief, and particularly for our planning purposes for 27 for Station 9, when do you need them operational? Because all this does is build buildings. We don't have battalions. We don't have trucks. Nope, that's not the word I want to use, engines.
You're right. Yep.
So when do you need them to work?
Now.
Okay.
Yes, if I could be quite blunt. So we have been studying both areas over the last year and a half. And with Station 8, it's definitely surpassed that marker. It's now at 4 to 5 calls per day that we get to that area. And that area would go just south of Wicks, all the way down to the east end of downtown, which would be North 13th area. And then on the west end, again, like you saw in Andy's report, we hit that marker as well. And we're at 5 to 6 calls for that.
So if we push construction back fiscal year 27, that would concern you?
It's pushing it, but yeah,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then, Mayor, my next question is for Debbie. Thank you.
You bet.
Sure. Debbie? Okay.
I wanted, Andy had followed up on the water loop for Skyway Drive, and it seems like the planning is based on projections of development occurring. Can you give us some insight as to what those are? Because it seems a little chicken egg. If there's water, they'll develop. If there's not water, but we won't put water until they develop. So what are the basis of those assumptions?
So we are doing a study with planning right now, looking at that corridor to kind of determine what sort of development could occur and would occur. But basically, it's our crystal ball. In a lot of these cases, we know where development's occurring in a lot of other places already, or it's very imminent, and we have conversations, but not as much concrete direction right now. So it's really a lot of this is our crystal ball. And do you have anything else you want to add? So That's
So
it.
you haven't talked to developers to say,
We've talked to every property owner for years. We've been talking to them. And there are ways to get water to certain properties
Okay.
along there. So it's not like there's no development. We have methods of, if it builds from the center at the Rebergs, they're out, you can get water to those parcels. If it builds on the far east end, of course, we extended the water and the sewer up there. So there's opportunities. We just think the way it's going to develop, we have the time to extend. It's not as urgent as some of the other projects that are in there.
okay, thank you. And then Andy, just one last comment and then Mayor, I'll be done. I know you said that the Jersey barrier at the cemetery had fallen out as a priority, but I think it's fallen out of the SIP entirely and I'm not sure we wanted to do that.
I'll let Mike answer.
Because I don't see it listed at all.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not listed. It was one of those $3.5 million projects.
I mean, I understand that we may not want to do it this fiscal year, but I don't think we want to lose track of it as a project somewhere in the CIP.
Right. Here you go.
Thanks, Andy. Mayor and Council, and Councilor Owen. So it did fall all the way out, and part of the reason is we were looking at, what priorities, how we placed our priorities on the items. And so we came up with safety was our number one. And so if a project was like a playground that was going to become unsafe, we needed to have that raise up. Things like the bridge across the creek in Pioneer Park. So then we're talking with Brandon, our cemetery guy, we thought maybe we would look for other forms of funding first. And so he's out searching grants and things like that. We would hopefully be able to bring it back, but at this point in time, we don't want to expend valuable funding that we need for safety and items that are going to be coming out of service in order to replace the Jersey barrier. That's why we did it that way.
Okay, thank you. Councilmembers Gulick and Neese?
Thank you. Maybe a first question is for planning. Just curious on the distribution, I guess, of projects. So there's nothing in fiscal year 25 or 28. There's sort of big gaps, and then there's really big years in 26 and 27. Just sort of, that was my first question, so just curious about that.
Yeah, Councilmember Gulick and Mayor and Council. Actually, part of that is a few of those projects are timed in with whether the bond passes tomorrow, and then the way we are looking at how to program those and the other funding sources that are going to be matching or being used for those projects. So that's part of what you're seeing on some of those in terms of where we've got them listed in the CIP because of that. There's other, I guess I'm just looking through here. Fifth Avenue corridor certainly is one that where you would be looking for a large grant, federal grant or something. So that's partly why that's a couple of years out to try to prepare for that. But some of those other smaller projects are partly tied to programming with the bond if that occurs, and then also the other funds that go with it.
Okay, thank you. And then, go ahead. Sorry, did you have a follow-up on that with Wyeth?
No.
Okay. My other questions, I think I probably want Debbie up here for those. Debbie, if you could answer a couple of questions on some public works projects. Oh, okay, very good. Yeah.
In fact, the two of you might want to move your seat to just closer up because you're, unless you're trying to get your steps in. Go ahead.
So,
Councilmember Gulick.
On the safe routes to school, it's listed as being non-sidewalk. What are kind of non-sidewalk expenses are there for safe routes to school?
So the Safe Routes to School project list is split into two different ones. One is sidewalk, where we're going to assess adjacent property owners, and then there's also city contribution on some of those. The non-sidewalk ones are things like the crossings, the enhanced crossings, refuge islands, some bike facilities. That's the majority of the types of projects those are.
Great, thank you. And then I really appreciate the traffic calming element added in there. I know in the North Park neighborhood, definitely really looking forward to what the implementation that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, I guess, for slowing traffic on North 22nd. I think that's really important in terms of residents feeling like, it's worth reinvesting in my house here. It's really important for rebuilding our neighborhoods. People feeling like it's worthwhile. So I really appreciate that very much. And then the last question was a solid waste one. I noticed that you noted that in the public works, you had a rubric or system for prioritizing things, and it mentioned that the landfill compost phase 2 was actually higher scored than the cell 6 expansion, but there was it's a couple years difference in terms of when they're being implemented. Just curious on the timing of that.
So, Councilmember Golick, it did come out higher in our prioritization process, but we need to get phase 1 up and going for a couple of years before we would start to implement phase 2. So that's why we pushed it back.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. My questions are for Debbie as well, for Public Works. Just real quick on the solid waste, I had some complaints this year regarding the fog pit and that, and didn't see anything in there as far as improvements. Is that something that you're handling just through non-capital improvement funds to kind of get that pit finished off and built?
The fog pit is an operational expense. So yes, we'll just keep moving that as we fill them.
Because I know they were complaining about the ramps being too short, not being able to get their longer trucks in there at the right angle to dump, and it was kind of a hassle. But I just want to make sure if there was any kind of capital improvements being needed for that was being done. But
yeah, we'll be able to do that with the equipment we have.
Okay, great. And then the other thing is interesting. I mean, Councilman Gould covered some of this, but on the Safe Routes to School, I know that when you put your projects in list, Safe Routes to School is one of the matrix that you looked at. Within that, I just want to make sure that that's still being scored high, a priority within which project should be, put on this list. Is that still correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure I followed that. Are you asking what the priority is within the Safe Routes to School?
No, when you're looking at different projects I think you have a matrix that you look at with different needs and what it fulfills. And one of those needs is the Safe Routes to School. And I just want to be assured that that component of Safe Routes to School is still considered a high priority when you're looking at which projects to include in the CIP.
Yes, we're funding it at the same level we talked about last year, which is finishing it, I think, in 5 years. Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boyack, Councilmember Ripsis.
So, Debbie, you had mentioned, I guess it was last week or the week before, that we lost our cement crew. What happened, and then what can we do in the future? Because that was part of the program for sidewalks.
Yep, we're trying to figure that out, and we promoted part of the crew, so it was actually a good thing. But yeah, we don't have a concrete crew right now. Over the winter, we're going to figure out exactly how we want to do that. Concrete's tough because if you're not big enough to be cost efficient, you're better off not doing it. So we either need to kind of, now that we've got a little bit more experience doing it, we're kind of deciding what that model looks like, and we're going to decide whether we go all in or whether we maybe don't do it, or whether we do a crew that just does fixes. We're kind of trying to figure that out right now. We'll have a plan before spring.
Thank you, Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor and Debbie. With you, I don't want to mess with your schedule, so I'm not going to do anything like that this year. But I do want to talk to you about drag strips. So we've got 3 projects, Grand, Rimrock, and Broadwater, scheduled to go into design over the next couple years. And as we've seen with Grand, between, say, Shiloh and Zimmerman, or, say, Central, when that was rebuilt, like what we put in created new drag strips. I mean, the complaints in those areas are a lot. So how are we going to go about designing these new stretches so that we don't do those, we don't recreate more drag strips out there? Because, I mean, the topography, they're just going to be straight roads. What design elements are we going to use? How do we make sure that as we go through that design process, we're not going to have to come back in a couple of years and say, hey, now we need to use our traffic calming money to kind of redesign these things to get rid of this speeding?
So a couple things that I would say. First, Maloney is the most recent example of an arterial that we rebuilt that I think drives well. I don't know how many people have been on it yet, but it drives well. Secondly, I think we need to be really cautious making our arterials hard to drive, and then people use cut-through traffic. So we want the traffic to be where the traffic needs to be, and not push them over to collectors or local streets where they can get through more efficiently. So we have to be careful. That's a balance. We're always going to try to keep it from being a drag strip like some portions of Broadwater Central, some of those places, but also make sure that it is where we want cars to be and it is the most efficient way for them to get somewhere. So it's a balance. We've used narrower lanes, we've used pedestrian refuge islands, we've used medians, we've used vertical, like trees, that sort of thing, where we can get a little bit of that vertical conflict so people can start feeling a little bit less open. So all of those things are what we've been putting into the most recent designs.
Thank you. So code used to say, and I'm not sure if this was something we changed or not, that council had to be consulted or redesigns of arterials had to come through council. And I'm not sure if we changed that or not. But when we go through this process, how do we make sure that, we have a say in that to make sure that we're happy with whatever that is?
We bring all arterials at 30% design, so you'll see all of them at 30%.
We will. All right, thank you.
That's still a thing.
It is. All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for Andy. If you could bring back the slide that you had early on that showed the park projects that had been removed from the CIP. I just didn't write fast enough, and I had a question about one of those. Yeah, very good. We already talked about the Jersey barrier replacement. These are ones that are all completely off the CIP at any point. They weren't just delayed, correct? And Mike may want to comment. And while you're doing that, my particular interest, I guess, is the first one, the Swords Park road replacement. 2 points. One, technically there is no place called Swords Park. There is only a place called Swords Rimrock Park by the agreement that we have with the donors of the property. And I would always encourage Parks Department to use that word Rimrock because just like Riverfront Park is really important for new people in our community to know where this thing is. They don't have a clue what Swords Park is. We all do, but a lot of people don't. And it just is really helpful to be geographically specific. But that's been on the CIP forever. In fact, it almost was going to happen, and then $1 million went, I think, to Castle Rock Park improvements, and now it's going away forever. And of course, the road built in the 30s is barely passable now. So, what's the plan for Swords Rimrock Park road replacement if it's not even on the CIP?
So, thanks, Mayor. So I did make a note here. I have Swords Rimrock written down, so we will change that in all our literature going forward. The plan is, and I think if you've driven it in the last 6 months, you notice we started doing a different way of maintaining that. So we've brought in a lot of the material that Debbie gives us that she takes off the streets, and we put that down the road to mill tailings, and we fill those holes with that, and we monitor that, and we stay on top of that, so that we're making that road as passable as we possibly can without getting those giant potholes that it was developing earlier. So we're making it a more passable route that way, and utilizing those funds then to come back and do those more, what we termed were more critical needs, like playground replacements or things that were coming out of play. If we didn't have the money, then we would have to like stop using a splash pad or things like that.
Okay, so there is no plan at any point to completely reduce the Swords Rimrock Park Road?
Not in the next 5 years, no. And because the number of items that have been recognized especially even just in the comp plan, going through that and finding out all of these different playgrounds and bridges and the sidewalk repairs and things that are falling in disrepair that we need to do, and that's where those funds were having to be redirected.
Okay, thank you. Chris, you want to comment on that? subject?
The other piece I would add, and I say this in the broadest sense, and is that next year, not CIP, but budget year, we would anticipate being somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 mils below our cap. One of the conversations that the city council will have, the staff will have each year going forward, the Budget and Finance Committee, is what, if any, of those mills are going to be used for what? Are they going to be used for one-time capital expenditures? So are we going to increase our investments in projects like this? Are they going to go towards more public safety expenses? Are they going to go for other general property tax funded programs and activities? So it's not a part of the CIP because I think it would be presumptuous to assume that some of it's going to get used in that area. But I think the next budget cycle is going to begin to set a tone for how what's the priority there? Staying 10 mils under the cap or using some of it in capital ways like this?
Okay, very good, thank you. Council, anything else? We will be.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I apologize. Councilmember Tricky.
No problem. Just kind of a follow-up to that conversation that we're having right there. Is there a public document someplace of projects that staff believes should be done in the next 5 years, but are not on the CIP because we do not have the budget for them?
Anybody want to comment on the wish list?
Is it just talking parks or?
So I think we're talking about a total capital improvement plan. No, they're not. They don't show up. Andy and I are kind of looking at each other because we did talk this time around, and I think a little bit with Budget and Finance, or maybe I'm making that up, which is how do we, for the benefit of, I think, exactly where Councilmember Tricky is going, the department heads are asked to present the CIP and a budget as to what they believe is necessary in order to supply services to the public. Andy and I then need to balance that with the realities of what we have in finance, and then ultimately you guys make political or policy adjustments to that. How do our documents, budget, and capital improvement plan show that iteration so that you can see what the subject matter expert is saying they need, how we're balancing that, and then how the policy body tweaks it, I think is a valuable document or information for people to have in both the short and long term. So it doesn't exist in what we've done in the past, but I think it should be something that we find a better tool to show going forward, because absolutely, this conversation, all the directors could bring forward things that they would like to have on radars that we've needed to move off in order to balance.
Yeah, that might be a useful exercise.
May I suggest that just show up as an appendix?
Yes, you can suggest in the same, I'm not saying we'll do that, Andy, I didn't say that's what's going to happen. In the same way as the planning documents we talked about earlier. I mean, if it's not in the budget or the CIP, it's not going to be found where those dollars are, in my opinion, in an appendix or otherwise.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out what a fully funded city would look like.
Okay, thank you. Council, I would recommend that if you continue to go through this as you do and you have other questions, a lot of what we've done tonight could also be accomplished through emails to staff. So let's continue to have that conversation as best we can. And we'll be back in 2 weeks to have further discussion about this, and we can drill down. Other things, though, to get on staff's radar screen in particular, or other council members before we open her up for public comment and move on. I'm not seeing anybody's hands, so we'll ask whether there is any public comment on our capital improvement plan. And if so, please come forward and tell us your name and address and ask to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment by the only member of the public who is here to comment?
Sat here for so long anyway.
Might as well say something. Hi, I'm Christy Drake, 2950 Walden Place. I guess I would just say I really appreciate the staff and City Council's patience with the CIP, and I was delighted to see the 25th Street Bridge on being considered there, and also the Expo Drive was something that I know we really need. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Don't see any, so we'll close the public comment period. Council, before we wrap up here and move on, anything else on the CIP? Okay.
Mayor, could I just
Chris.
ask, is there, relative to the directors, Andy and I will be here 2 weeks from now, along with Kevin, to CIP is also, both the ERP, Equipment Replacement Plan, and CIP are on the work session 2 weeks from now. If there are particular department directors, that you would like at that meeting? I mean, based on tonight's discussion, I wouldn't bring any other directors to come 2 weeks from tonight other than Andy and I, unless I'm missing something.
Jeff Roach sat here all night, and he's feeling very lonely.
He's okay.
He's okay.
I can speak for him and say, that's all right.
Yeah.
His feelings aren't hurt. But I wouldn't have him come 2 weeks from now, right? No questions, no sub questions came up about the airport. So we're kind of looking puzzled here, trying to read each other's body language. Would you not anticipate the need to have a conversation about the CIP again in 2 weeks, just the ERP?
I think it's a little dangerous given the scale of the thing. I think people would probably feel more comfortable to have the CIP come back, even if it's a shorter conversation. Am I correct about that, Council? Yes, I see some. Okay. So yeah, keep it on. Council, I guess we don't want to have staff to have to sit here for hours if they're not needed. Chris, could I suggest that before that meeting, you ping us with email, phone call, and specifically ask us to think about questions or departments that we would like to have representation on. And if Jeff's name doesn't show up on that, then I guess, Council, the assumption is those department heads, we can't assume that they'll be here for the next work session. Is that fair? Councilmember Owen? Just a reminder that, as was mentioned, the Budget and Finance Committee will have another bite at this next week. Council members are obviously welcome to attend. It'll be in the conference room downstairs, so members of the public can attend, council members can attend. That may help flag some additional issues as well. It's the 14th at 1 o'clock. Yep, in the first floor conference room. So council members who want to discuss this further or members of the public are certainly welcome to attend. Thank you for that reminder. And then when we come back in 2 weeks, how do we want to have this discussion? Go by department by department by department? That's what we'll do. That's what we'll default to unless there's another plan suggested by council members or the budget committee, I guess. Okay, then if that's then concludes item number 4, we'll move on to item number 5, which is just sort of highlight of upcoming agenda items. Our packet for next week is now out. I've got a copy here if anybody wants to look at it. Chris, anything there you want to call our attention to, or future ones beyond that? Council meetings before that.
Mayor and Council, so yes, as you say, Mayor, as you stated, the agenda is in front of you. Packet is out to the public for 1 week from tonight. A couple of things just highlight on the regular agenda. First, nuisance property abatement. That should go pretty clean. Public hearing on the sale of city property, the ordinance. So remember, quite stripped down to just deal with the additional options of direct negotiation, auction, things like that. That's really critical, frankly, to moving some of these properties, especially the smaller ones that we've talked about, wanting to get onto the market and get sold. That is on your agenda. And then you have the critical decision to determine who the deputy mayor will be going forward. So that is on your agenda. looking out further to the next work session, we had the equipment replacement plan and the follow-up, or what we would hope would be the last work session tied to the CIP. And if it's not necessary because of the Budget and Finance Committee, great. We just want to get then the capital improvement plan up for adoption at that first meeting in December. And then we always have a fallback meeting in December because of Christmas and the holidays. If you remember, for December, what we end up doing is 2 regulars and 1 work session. So we do that first Monday as work session, then we do 2 back-to-back regular meetings. And so we would, it comes forward for adoption for that second week or first regular meeting in December. That way we can get it all wrapped up before new elected officials are asked to adopt a $500+ million 5-year CIP the first night that they're on the job. So it really is critical that we finish that process. I think those are really the highlights, I would say, for the agendas. If appropriate, I'm happy to answer the question earlier in a broad sense. If you want more information to the specificity of my time over the past couple of weeks, okay, I'll shoot you an email. Direct and indirect is just what I looked at my calendar. Direct time dealing with the unfortunate violence that we've experienced over the past 10 days, and then indirect related to efforts in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Chris about this item? Councilmember Owen?
Mayor, could we plan that for each of the work sessions remaining in this year, we have some time dedicated to public safety? I think the chief has said we need to stay on this, we need to keep it in the public, and so I think at a minimum, each one of our work sessions should include some time dedicated to that. It doesn't mean that we have to have a ton of resources here, but at least there should be some policy level discussion about where we go.
Sure. And then I'm also happy in that it'll fall right in line, as you mentioned. Yes, your director team and Kevin and I will be on an overnight retreat next week. And about half to the 2/3 of the time that we're there with our facilitator, we will be working through strategic planning, carrying out what it looks like for the objectives and plans and measurables relative to improving safety, better design, infrastructure, the 5 key strategic goals that the council's adopted in the past. So that would be something I would anticipate putting on one of those agendas. As part of that is getting a feel from you guys. Hey, do you like where we're heading, and what should we be thinking about as we move into the next phase of that process?
Okay, thank you very much. Any public comment on item number 5? Okay, if not, we'll consider that covered. Council discussion. Public comment on anything not on, Councilmember Tricky, was that you?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
So hopefully you received a hard copy, and I'll send out an electronic copy of an initiative I want to bring forward next week to fund membership in the Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority. And I would just simply echo, I was going to bring up some ideas to talk about tonight, but I am happy to have the conversation at some other work session where we talk very specifically about how do we keep prevention of violence in our community at the very top of the community's agenda, not just ours.
Okay. We'll look forward to that at our next meeting. Anything else in the way of council discussion? Councilmember Gulick.
I just had a question for Councilmember Shariki. I think I'm supportive of membership, but I think it'd be helpful for in advance of next week's discussion, just knowing what is the cost for annual membership as a part of the authority?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I included that in there. It's $6,000 for this year.
Okay, thank you. And then, Mayor, I have a different point or question, I guess. So we have it with our crime prevention funds, we had allocated some of that money for trying to, city council can't, we don't have a jail, I don't have a city jail. What other things we can be doing to increase capacity there? Councilmember Owen had brought forward an idea of some sort of facility that can hold before arraignment, and she's just wanted to see if we have a quick update on kind of how discussions are going, anything to report there.
Councilmember Rowan, you want to respond to that?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the question. I think, as everybody knows, County Attorney Twido convened a working group to address, a subcommittee of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee to work on what the future needs for YCDF are. I think that committee is sort of taking a two-pronged approach in addressing recommendations. The first is, are there things that can be done to reduce jail populations now? Namely, can we move cases faster so that people aren't holding beds waiting for long periods of trial? And then the second is, what would an expansion look like? And so we are meeting weekly. And in fact, today's conversation was, does the city's proposed pre-arraignment facility fit within that scope or not? I think most of us believe that it does. And so there have been what I have found to be very productive conversations about that, about how that facility fits in, the impact that it might have on reducing jail overcrowding, but also generally improving the criminal justice outcomes in the community. So I'm really thrilled with where the conversations are. In addition, I think Chris and Gina have worked hard on a proposal letter that will be sent to the sheriff's office and the county commissioners. County commissioners own the land, sheriff operates the facility, and we'll invite them to begin negotiations around it. So Councilmember Boyette has been fantastic in bringing people together to talk about this, to get traction. So I think we're making really tremendous progress, and I'm really excited with where we're at so far. So I don't know, Mike, if you had anything you wanted to add, or Chris, but I think we're actually picking up steam quite rapidly.
Councilmember Boyette and Chris?
Well, I mean, when I think we first started the conversation, the idea was no from the county, just no. Now it's yes. So, I mean, I feel this is a good move. Whether it comes to provision or not, I don't know. Yes, we would like to have this. I think the morale of the troops would go up because they know that they could at least put somebody misdemeanor away for 24, 48, or 72 hours, and that our judges would meet them. So I think we're going to go forward with it, yes.
Okay, Councilmember Pearson, and then Chris.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a question I was actually going to ask the chief. Today at a meeting, he was talking about some of the things that the city was looking at, Family Justice Center, the domestic violence unit. But the one thing that he didn't mention were these holding facilities. And so I was wondering if he wasn't a proponent of it, if he just overlooked that as part of, some of the things that we're moving forward with, because there are so many times that the public is saying, what are you guys doing? You're not doing anything. And there are some things that are being done, but we get very little information. Jennifer's done a great job, Mike's done a great job getting some of these programs, at least the conversation started. So I guess, and I think what I'm hearing from Mike and Jennifer is that administratively, you guys are on board with this, and I would assume the chief is on board with this as well. And the only reason I'm saying this is because he didn't mention it today. And could have been an oversight.
Mayor.
Good segue to Chris. You
Yeah,
want to
Mayor and
comment further?
Council, Councilmember Purinton, I'm confident, strong proponent. It just got missed today in the comments. But yeah, the chief and certainly administration work is happening at the policy level between elected officials here and at the county, and that's a great thing. So,
Okay. All right. Anything else, Councilmember Joy? Councilmember Treek, I'm going to recognize Councilmember Joy. We'll come back to you. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I will send out the 32 questions you should ask your community should discuss before you decide on a jail expansion. And one of the things that Mr. Armstrong, who was from Alternatives, didn't, I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, but one of the questions that's sort of there to ask ourselves is, if we had grant money to give to Alternatives, what would have they had done with it? And that would have been to get people out of the detention center who cannot afford the fees to get out. So I'll send that back out, 33 questions that you should ask yourself and discuss as a community before you do a jail expansion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Treeke?
That was actually the point that I was going to bring up. The $100,000 that Alternatives was asking for would start getting people out of the jails as soon as that money is available, as opposed to waiting for, the bureaucracy to grind its way through this process. So I'm just curious to see if that is something that is being considered by the Budget Committee, what happened with that proposal, or, what happened with those proposals.
Okay, would you like to address that tonight? Sounds like. Was there any response to that? We don't want to get in this too deep since none of this is on the agenda, but was there any response to that particular question?
Mayor, I can send that out in email.
Okay, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Just sort of summarizing our discussion about it.
Okay, council, hour is late. It's about 9:30. That was valuable. Any items of public comment?
Hey, we still have 2.5 hours till tomorrow.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right, then, seeing nothing else.
Sure everyone votes.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, everybody who's watching. Tomorrow's election day, but don't mail your ballot. It is not sufficient just to have it postmarked. It's got to be in the election office. So walk it down there yourself. Thanks, everybody. See you in a week. We're adjourned.